Hi, I'm Nat.
And I'm Guy. And Ukraine and Russia and the United States may have a deal. We're going to be talking about that today. It was breaking just before we went on the air, as well as a lot of other conflicts emerging around the world, as well as we're going to get into a ton of Epstein news and a couple other things. But let's start with the breaking news. That would be the US-Russia deal.
Yes, so from Megatron breaking, Trump and Putin have reached a deal on Ukraine behind closed doors, mainly on Russian conditions, Axios reports. According to the new plan, the US and other countries will recognize Crimea and Donbass as legitimate Russian territory, reducing Ukraine's armed forces by 50% and no missiles on Ukrainian territory. Other conditions include recognizing Russian as the official state language in Ukraine and granting official status to the Russian Orthodox Church, the FT reports.
Yeah, and I think this is a big win kind of for everybody except for Europe. Europe wants to keep this thing going. We're going to see if Europe can sneak troops into Ukraine and kind of keep them there permanently in order to spark a war sometime in the future when they're more prepared. There was a ton of other news coming out of Europe kind of saying Russia is spying on us, Russia is shooting lasers at us. We're going to get into those articles, but I think it was Europe kind of hearing the rumblings of there was a negotiation in its final stages here. Now, hopefully this comes to pass. I also am aware that Trump is getting a real bad rub from these Epstein files right now. Maybe he's just leaking this as a distraction, but because Europe was kind of leaking these other articles about lasers and everything else, it makes me think that this Russia deal is close to an end now. And there is a lot of major outlets kind of reporting on this.
Yes, and from CNN Politics, Trump administration quietly attempting to hammer out new peace deal with Russia. So it's not just speculation, there is more of actual rumblings. The Trump administration has been quietly hammering out a new peace plan with Russia to end the war with Ukraine. A person familiar with the talks told CNN. President's special envoy Steve Witkoff, who has been at the center of the administration's talks with Moscow, has been leading the effort, the source said. The negotiations accelerated this week as the administration feels the Kremlin has signaled a renewed openness to a new deal.
And I've kind of been watching this war right from the very beginning, and Russia has really been winning the whole way along. But over the last year, it has really accelerated, and especially over the last 3 months, I mean, the front lines are absolutely collapsing. They almost have all the territory they wanted in the first place. I don't think they want all of Ukraine. It can become an Afghanistan situation where it's a never-ending war for them. They got the territory they kind of needed that makes Russia a little bit easier to defend now. If they can get this peace negotiation going with the United States, possibly they can get some of the sanctions lifted, possibly start engaging with Europe again. But there was also that tunnel under Alaska going to Russia, possibly major trade deals between the U.S. and Russia. You definitely see Trump allying with opposite people than Biden was. Saudi Arabia, he kind of wants to engage with Russia too. At least that's what it seems like. There's major room for investment in Russia and for Russia to invest in the United States as well. It could benefit both countries a lot. I think the Europeans would absolutely hate this if it happened. In order to get those business dealings kind of going, they need it into this war first. And that's what's kind of been on the table and the rumblings all the way along these talks, that if the war ended, the U.S. and Russia would change their relations kind of dramatically.
I couldn't do it. And Rafa says, hello, Rafa. Thank you for being here.
Good to see you.
Also, we do read all the comments, at least for now, because we are small enough that we can. So do leave your comments about what you think of each of the stories, the situations. What's your take? What's your opinion? Because that is also what makes the show and what makes it more interesting, because it is important to know what y'all are thinking as well.
Yeah, and if you can't leave a message, just subscribe first. We only allow subscribers to leave messages so we don't get hit with a bunch of spam and nonsense. So I think it's 10 minutes. You have to be subscribed.
Yeah,
then
5 or 10 minutes.
Then you can leave a comment.
Yes, and we're also trying to get to 1,000 subscribers, so it would help us out a lot if you do subscribe so we can, I said 10,000 or 1,000?
1,000.
1,000. Eventually 10,000, but 1,000 for now.
On your show, you get a lot of comments. You have a show in Spanish on Nat and the Guy in Spanish. It would be nice if we started getting comments like that on this show.
Yes.
Rafa's great, though.
Yeah, Rafa, you are great. And Walker and Apollo007 and everybody else who does come and talk to us. Sometimes we are also streaming on RUMBLE, the whole show. So if for some reason YouTube does censor your comments, because these are sensitive subjects, then go over to RUMBLE and we will read the chat from there as well.
And I have been noticing YouTube is censoring a lot more, at least in the comments. They're still pretty good at not banning creators yet. We'll see kind of what happens, though. Yes. Okay, let's go into the next story.
And Psychic says, yes, 2 days in a row. So yes, thank you for being here as well.
Good to see you again.
Yes. Well, you're not seeing them. We always say good to see you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for always correcting me, though.
You're welcome. That's what I do. So let's move on to, okay, hold on. Rafa
and I think this is going to be huge news. We're going to be talking about this Ukraine-US deal not only all week long, but if it actually materializes, this is going to be huge for multiple regions and the way trade negotiations around the world kind of break down. It would be nice to see if Russia could trade with China as well as the US, so there would kind of be a go-between within regions.
And also specifically because you have been following this since it started, since before we even had a show almost. Well, before we had a live show and when we had the channel, you were like one of the first people I even knew that knew what was going on.
Yeah, and I mean, when the Biden administration was in there was absolutely no talking to Russia. It was just escalation, and they were just really preparing Europe and the U.S. to kind of go to war with Russia in the long term. Luckily, they weren't ready, and Trump got in office, and I had a lot of hope when he got in office he would renew talks, and he did, and it seems to be going fairly well. The problem was Russia was in an extreme power position, and they're having to give up a lot right now in order to not continue, because with the front lines collapsing in spectacular fashion the way they have been over the last couple months, Russia could ask for a lot more. I think they're happy with an off-ramp if it can spark some economic growth within their own country.
And Rafa also says, by the way, you're about to reach 100 in the VIP live, right? So Rafa calls RUMBLE the VIP live.
Yeah,
it's the Green Monster or whatever you want to call it. YouTube doesn't like us to say the name because it's a competitor. But yes, we're almost there. 2 subscribers to go. So please,
2?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Because I live stream in Spanish there now so people can comment without censorship. They're really YouTube is really censoring comments in Spanish specifically.
Okay, yeah.
Interestingly enough.
Because of probably what's going on in Mexico and Venezuela, it being so sensitive right now. That being said, 2 more subscribers on Rumble. We will be monetized on that channel, which would be great.
You said the name.
That's fine.
Speaking of Venezuela, let's move on down south. From going underground, Donald Trump says Maduro wants to talk. I'm open to dialogue. Trump appears to be walking back his threats of regime change war against Venezuela, which could be his Latin America and Vietnam. No doubt the neocons of the administration, such as Marco Rubio, will use every opportunity he can to steer Trump in the direction of war again. If the Bolivarian revolution is to survive, either Maduro will have to give Trump some concessions so Trump can claim a theatrical victory so that the neocons can turn their attention to attacking another country, or if the countries of Latin America, Russia, and China use this lull intention as an opportunity to stand steadfastly behind Venezuela, it would benefit them all for the rest of the presidency.
Yeah, and we have another post coming on the back of this we'll talk about in a minute, but I was saying as soon as Trump got into office, this is one of the places I was focused on because of the secret talks that happened in Mexico at the end of his first administration. They had almost negotiated Maduro and his inner circle, as well as his family, to kind of step down and go in exile from that country and allow somebody else to be put into power. Problem was, Trump didn't win the next election. Those talks fell apart. I mean, they were literally a hair away. I said when he first started putting military around Mexico and Venezuela, that it was to put a ton of pressure on Venezuela to get those talks not only restarted, but really accelerate them to the point where Maduro would step down. Russia and Cuba are 2 of the big countries that are talked about that Maduro could possibly go into exile. I definitely think he would pick Russia because Marco Rubio is focused on Venezuela, a color revolution, and switching power players within Venezuela. As soon as that happens, he's going to be focused on Cuba. Cuba is actually his main target, but he wanted to focus on Venezuela first to get all the chess pieces kind of in line. Now, Marco Rubio is a neocon and a warmonger. I don't like him, along with Susie Wilds. That being said, it's going to be great if Trump can avoid a war simply by projecting strength, getting the negotiations going again, and allowing Maduro to step down. That also leads way for future negotiations. If he wants other people to step down, he can say, look how we treated Maduro in Venezuela. We allowed him to step down, take his money, and go to another place, and now he's living happily rather than constantly engaging in these never-ending wars.
And it was Rick Grinnell who has been talking about this, who was the advisor and the one that was involved in those major talks. And he spoke about it here in Mexico City at last year's CPAC, which we went to and reported on. So there is evidence back in the back channel of this and our other channel of us talking about this possibility for a while now.
Yeah, and Rick Grinnell is actually one of the prominent gay figures within the conservative administration.
The Trump administration.
Yeah, I was actually really impressed with him when I seen him at CPAC. He was by far the most impressive person there. Very competent, very good at his job. He doesn't put his sexuality first. You would never know it until you actually research the guy.
And speaking of Venezuela, etc., another country that they might want to turn to is Mexico, and it could be Mexico, especially now that they have that excuse and that narrative that we saw over this past weekend with the violent riots, as they're calling them in the US, from a lot of both mainstream but also independent reporters who usually are pretty good on assessing the situation. Those that have been involved or could be involved with the Trump administration as, talking heads have been pointing towards just how fed up the Mexican people are without giving much context, except for a few people like on Redacted. They had someone that spoke a bit more in depth about the Mexico situation. But if they do steer away from going full on with Venezuela, which in my opinion was just like a rehearsal for what they could do in Mexico, then they could go full on with Mexico and continue with that, especially if here in Mexico tensions continue to rise.
Yeah, and it's not just Venezuela. Again, if he's negotiating an end to the Ukraine ordeal that's been going on, it seems like he's negotiated a tentative end to what's going on in Israel. And now if he can get Maduro to step down, he's going to completely refocus his efforts. You have to think there are three major countries in the crosshairs. That's going to be Cuba, Mexico, and China. And I don't think he's going to divide his forces. He's going to focus on one at a time. If he focuses on the smallest player, he's going to obviously focus on Cuba. And he could probably get the regime to step down fairly quickly there. That being said, I think Mexico is going to be one of the main targets, and it's the easiest to sell to his base because he can link it to the cartels. It's right on the southern border. It involves America. We need to protect our borders. So it's an easy sell. And if he can really put pressure on the Mexican administration, and it's going to be easy for him to pressure the Mexican administration at that point if Maduro steps down, because he has the tariffs kind of dangling over their head, number one. And number two, he has a ton of military force already off the coast right there sitting there. And he has the example of what happened to Maduro.
And in Mexico, Morena, which is the current party in power, and Claudia Sheinbaum have been amicable, let's just say, to Maduro and have spoken positively and wanting to also offer support. So it would be interesting to see Trump try to go at that. But that's exactly right. Mexico would be the best for his base, which right now continues to say, let's stop sending and spending money elsewhere. And it would kind of make all the players within this fracturing MAGA conservative movement, the neocons, the rhinos, happy, because in a sense, it is doing war and it is being able to invest in the war machine, to call it that way. But it would also make the base that is America first. We want no illegal immigration. We want no, trade of illegal substances, etc. Both, like all of the check boxes get ticked if he comes into Mexico, and kind of would keep most players happy.
Well, yeah, and I also
except Mexico, of course.
And I also think it's less about the war machine and a long-term strategy coming into Mexico. If he can actually go after the cartels and do something there, he's going to be looking to invest heavily in Mexico. A lot of the Mexican companies at that point, I think, would become American-owned, American interest would probably be oversized in Mexico. So I don't know if necessarily that's always the best thing. But if they can get the cartels out of Mexico, they can then use Mexico as the foothold to go into the rest of South America without it looking like the one pressing America's interest in South America, but make it look like Mexico on behalf of America is pushing Latin interest in South America.
And we have spoken about why it would be a bad idea for Trump to come in full force, like all the way to the kitchen without the help of the Mexican government, because that could create a situation where both for the cartels and for the Mexican government and for the military, the National Guard, etc., that common enemy could help them all rise and make violence and the state of life for Mexicans even more dangerous. But if they do cooperate, then that could maybe work.
I think what he's doing is he's trying to get Venezuela off of the board because there's a lot of activity going between Mexico and Venezuela. If he can get Maduro to step down, he's going to be focused completely on Sheinbaum, forcing her to either cooperate with the American administration to clean up the cartels or to step down so they can put somebody else in power that will cooperate. I think that's the plan. We'll see if he's going to be successful at that plan. I would suspect that he can get that going if Maduro steps down. If Maduro doesn't step down willingly and go into exile, like he's currently negotiating, and he actually has to have a strike within Venezuela that turns into more of a long-term guerrilla war, it's not going to fare well at that point for Trump coming into Mexico.
And from job side, President Trump has approved CIA planning for covert operations in Venezuela while simultaneously reopening secret back channel talks with Maduro, the New York Times reports. People briefed on the talks said Maduro has floated stepping down after a 2 to 3 year transition, but the White House has rejected the idea outright. Nevertheless, diplomacy is not off the table, as the report says Trump hasn't settled on an endgame. He could seek a deal giving U.S. firms greater access to Venezuela's oil, press for Maduro's voluntary exit, or pursue a forced removal as military pressure builds. And those talks were already, once again, ongoing during the first Trump administration, towards the end of the first Trump administration. And one of the only reasons why they broke down and they didn't continue and actually see Maduro be removed from power was because Trump's administration ended.
Well, it's costing Trump tens of millions of dollars just to keep the military in the Gulf there. He's not giving them 2 to 3 years. He's going to want this done before the midterms so he can kind of point at this when the midterms come up. There's a lot of negative press Trump is getting from the Epstein files right now. This would be a huge victory for him. It would allow him to then focus on Mexico, which he can connect with it being right at the southern border of America. So it's a lot more justifiable, at least to his base. I think he's got Maduro probably has, they'll get these talks done within a month or two at most. The longest it could possibly take is the midterms. If it doesn't happen by the midterms, I would expect a strike or something to happen by that time.
And from Fox News, again, Fox signs off on possible CIA operations in Venezuela. Operations could lay groundwork for broader military campaign as tensions escalate with Maduro regime, or it could also be a tactic to get him to step down.
He doesn't want never-ending negotiations to continue to happen, so he's going to start conducting CIA operations in Venezuela to get massive pressure on Maduro. He's flying drones over Venezuela. He's putting all kinds of pressure on Maduro himself. He's got a bounty out for his head, so Maduro can't even trust his inner circle right now, especially if his inner circle thinks Maduro's going to step down and they're not going to get immunity. Maybe they'll just take Maduro and turn him into the U.S. for that bounty. So he's putting pressure on Maduro from every angle. I would expect Maduro to step down sometime in the near future here.
Hopefully.
Well, okay.
What?
No, that's fine.
Okay. Now moving on to a different pole of the world, around Saudi Arabia and the Middle East. From Fox News, President Trump designates Saudi Arabia a major non-NATO ally, unveiling a defense and economic partnership with the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman.
And this is absolutely massive, and I'm going to explain why this is such a big deal. He also got $1 trillion of investment. Originally, the deal was going to be 600 billion. Now it's up to 1 trillion. The point of this whole thing is things are going sideways for the conservatives, and there's a split within the America First and the MAGA movement and your traditional rhinos. what's happening is the base is splitting on Trump. With Saudi Arabia coming in here, getting military guarantees, investing over $1 trillion in America, America can easily throw $40 billion back at Saudi Arabia of their own money, tell Saudi Arabia to give that to Israel. So America no longer has to fund Israel. And then it will be regional players supporting each other in the Middle East. And that will allow America to kind of step back from the region and have local alliances such as Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the other 7 nations that were involved in the Middle East peace accords originally kind of deal with their own backyard. America kind of needs to get out of that region and needs to look like they're no longer funding that region. If they're really going to get $1 trillion from Saudi Arabia, they can simply give some of that money back, tell Saudi Arabia to give that to Israel, and then pull all American funding from Israel, which should at least satisfy the base. And long term, it's going to really be good for the United States to get out of that region. It's nonstop, constant wars every few years, whether it's Iraq 1, Iraq 2, or Afghanistan. So for the long-term benefit of the U.S. going truly America first and focusing on the North and South American hemispheres, I think Saudi Arabia is the big player. The U.S. kind of needs to step up and ally with Israel so they can pull out of that region.
Do you want to watch the?
Oh yeah, we can watch
what he actually said.
We officially designated the kingdom yesterday as the major non-NATO ally. That's a big deal. That's actually a very big deal. Great honor.
And this allows Saudi Arabia to maybe not invest as much within their military, still have a strong military, but now they have U.S. military backing so they can focus on their economy and other players within the region, creating success for a lot of countries in the region economically and really creating that original Middle East peace accords with those 7 nations, including Israel, to normalize relations in the Middle East and maybe get a long-lasting peace. I know that sounds crazy with Israel currently having 7 wars they're engaged in, but if there's any road to peace, it's going to start with Saudi Arabia really economically making alliances within that region and possibly the Israeli people voting somebody new in other than Netanyahu.
Happens seldom, very seldom, if at all. So I just want to congratulate you on that. That's a sign of trust. We signed a historic strategic defense agreement yesterday also, and that's something that is likewise very rare, and it's a very honored company that you're in. And we're going to be selling Saudi Arabia some of the greatest military equipment ever built. We build the best military equipment in the world by far. That's why we do the most business, including nearly 300 American-made tanks is what you're buying, among many other things, the airplanes, and we're working on getting that approved very quickly. It's already approved, don't worry.
Okay, and there's 2 major alliances within that region. There's the Iran alliance, and then there's the Saudi Arabia alliance, hopefully that would involve Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the 7 other players. The Iran alliance involves Iran, Russia, China, along with Afghanistan and other smaller players within that region. If each of those big power bases can focus on their economy and their alliances economically with each other and move away from war, it could really strengthen the region and hopefully move away from war. Okay, let's go.
I just wanted to show the article from Politico. Trump elevates Saudi Arabia to major non-NATO ally status. Announcement came hours after the Saudi crown prince announced he would increase his investment in the U.S. to nearly $1 trillion.
Yeah, and that's a lot of money. That's going to permanently strengthen the alliance between Saudi Arabia and the U.S. They were really having a huge alliance based upon oil, but now it's going to be based upon investment going forward and oil. So it's really strengthened there.
And also another thing that has strengthened, apparently, again, is the relationship between Elon Musk and Trump, because Elon Musk is now expected to attend President Trump's dinner with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman Al Saud
Okay, and I kind of have to point this out. The whole second half of this episode is going to be based upon Epstein and some crazy things that are happening right now. But Elon Musk was flying way too close to the sun for the administration. He was uncovering dirt, not with just USAID, but with a lot of Epstein files. And we have to remember when he first got pushed out, he said, the reason I'm being pushed out is because Trump's in the Epstein files. And both the Democrats and the Republicans are in those files. They both wanted to push Elon Musk out because he was really investigating a lot of power players in Washington.
Do you want me to play it, or
Oh, yeah, we can play it.
is it just them saying hi to each other?
I haven't actually seen this clip.
Okay. Yeah, there's no sound.
And I think for the future of X, this is also going to be huge for Tesla. Saudi Arabia is invested heavily with Elon Musk and a lot of his companies and AI. So taking AI globally, this is going to really help strengthen those alliances through President Trump for Elon Musk with Saudi Arabia.
And Rafa asks, any advice for curing a cold or curing cold? I'm guessing you mean a cold, like you're sick. Maybe don't run at night at 10K when it's cold outside. That would be my number one advice. Rafa was messaging us as he was running a 10K late at night. So maybe,
Sleep and vitamin
take
C.
care of yourself. And vitamin D. Vitamin D3 is actually pretty important. You need to take more than you would usually need. So just check your weight in kilos and convert it to the milligram dosage and take a little bit more. Again, we're not giving health advice, but chicken soup as well and lots of fluids.
Yeah, but not canned chicken
Liquid.
soup.
No.
Okay, because it has so much sodium and preservatives in it. Okay, let's go into the next story here. And I think it was Scheinbaum.
Yes, so moving back to the other poll here in Mexico, last time, she's such an idiot. Last time the United States intervened in Mexico, they took half our territory. President Sheinbaum said she would not accept support from foreign troops after Trump suggested he would be proud to bomb Mexican boats to stop cartels from coming to the U.S.
Yeah, and with this Venezuelan talks and possibly Maduro stepping down, if he does, he's going to be focusing on Scheinbaum like laser. Either you cooperate with the U.S. military in conjunction with the Mexican military to put pressure on the cartels, or you step down and we'll get somebody in there that can. I think that's going to be his line. I think she's going to be under a ton of pressure, not just from the U.S., but also from China, also from the globalists. I mean, they're pulling her every which way.
But she also doesn't know history, and she continues with this victimization narrative that a lot of the left wing in Mexico, at least the left wing, some of the right wing too, has, where she's saying, oh, the last time they intervened, they took half our territory. No, they were sold it because of the debt we had and because it was the only way to actually get out of it and get out of the issues we had.
Yeah, it's going to be hard for her to play the victim narrative if Maduro does step down and then they start going after Cuba as well. One by one, all these players that she would usually align with are kind of, she's being isolated.
And I mean, we saw her play the victim after the protests as well. But do you want to see what she said? She speaks very slowly. So I can translate if it's in Spanish.
Ya lo dije la última vez
No, there's
que
subtitles.
Estados Unidos vino
Let me lower the volume and I can just read subtitles.
a México.
Last time the United States intervened in Mexico, they took half our territory. I've said it many times in my phone conversations with President Trump.
Telefónicas, él ha
He has
sugerido
repeatedly
varias ocasiones,
suggested or offered a U.S. military intervention in Mexico,
militar de Estados Unidos en México, lo que necesiten para
or whatever we need to
combatir
combat
grupos
criminal
delictivos.
groups.
Pero
But I've told him every time
podemos
that we
colaborar,
can collaborate, that they can help us with any information they have, but that we operate within our own territory.
nosotros no
We will
aceptamos
not accept intervention
ningún gobierno.
from any foreign government.
Okay, and that's going to be pretty good right there. I'm going to talk about kind of, it doesn't matter what she wants. The U.S. is going to do what they want to do. So even if she says the U.S. military is not going to come in, and obviously the U.S. military isn't going to want that projection of military power on the world stage without the government welcoming them in. So if she resists them from coming in, all they're going to do is invest in one of the major cartels and have that cartel gain power and roll up all the other cartels and then roll that cartel into the government. I've watched a lot of military advisors kind of talk about the strategy strategy. Even if they work with the Mexican government, they're going to wait to see which cartel is kind of winning, invest in that cartel, have them roll up the other cartels, and then roll them into the government and probably legitimize them.
Because it's not like they haven't tried or done this before in other wars that they wanted to be involved in, or in other regime changes as well.
And they've created fake cartels all over the world in order to have a justification to come into the country.
I mean, here they're not fake, but
there's rumors that certain cartels have been assisted by the U.S. military.
yes, and have been trained.
And
as
if
well.
they,
that I would say.
and if they already have those relations, that's probably going to be the cartel that they pick. I don't want to go too much into naming actual.
Yes,
players.
but it is also interesting that, again, she's saying that we can handle it, Mexico will handle it, they can help us with information, but that's it. However, at the same time, a week ago, she was coming out and saying that they can't go fully after all the cartels and all the people individually that are doing these crimes because that would be against their human rights. So we do see the priority, and we do see the damage that the left and the left thinking has done to the actual pursuit of security in Mexico.
Yeah, and you just have to realize that if she says no and she completely resists the U.S. from coming in, they're going to come in other ways through the funding of specific cartels, like I said. So they have multiple ways to do this. It's not always above board. We're seeing something similar things happen in Venezuela. I was watching a thing today about the history of the cartel that they're saying that they have to justify to go in there. It looks like a made-up CIA cartel as well. So...
And Psychic says she's trying to frighten the people to her feet or at her feet, and also said right. And yes, exactly. She is trying to frighten those that might want to or have called for full-on U.S. intervention, like Lili Tellez, like a lot of the fake right, as I call it, or the fake conservatives here in Mexico, which would be the PAN, or the National Action Party, which is the only one that could has tried to call itself conservative, but they're not really. However, Lili Tellez and a bunch of other politicians from that party have been speaking out about wanting this U.S. military intervention. However, personally, I think if the U.S. just comes in barging through the door without the cooperation from the Mexican government, a Mexican government that clearly cannot do it by themselves, and they continue to prove that, even worse with Morena and their whole slogan from 7 years ago saying hugs, not bullets. However, if the U.S. comes in all by itself, that also would not help. And again, it would just collude a lot of different sectors.
First of all, they're not going to come in by themselves. That's not even a thing.
But that's what a lot of the politicians that are speaking out, especially now after the march, about wanting that intervention are asking
That's
for.
why I'm about to explain. They won't come in by themselves. They'll either have a cartel do the work for them, they'll work in cooperation with the Mexican government, or they'll have a color revolution through the people. And then they'll come in when the people kind of take Sheinbaum out, they put somebody else in, and then they'll welcome the U.S. in. So either which way the U.S. is going to do it, they're not just going to come in with everybody saying, no, don't come in, I don't think.
However, in Mexico, it is pretty difficult to change and to have Claudia step down. It is a very long process that Morena themselves have actually changed, so it benefits them.
Not if we look at other countries with color revolutions. It can happen overnight.
But I'm saying the process to do it, if they do go through that route, because I don't think it would be as violent or immediate as we've seen within other color revolutions.
I think you would be surprised, especially what has been going down the last couple of years with these color revolutions. That also being said, it's becoming a multipolar world, and the United States is looking at the North American, South American, and Central America hemispheres as theirs. So, yeah, they've kind of neglected this sphere of the world for a long time now. I think they're going to really want Mexico to be the foothold which they engage the rest of Central and South America. That's why they want to get the cartels out and get the American business cartels in, and they want to be able to do that safely. I think that's why they're focusing on it so much now.
And the U.S. also realized, I think, that China was taking a grip and a hold of Latin America by funding a lot of the infrastructure projects, by using them as a way to export their goods. But now they have been hit with tariffs, and we have seen China retreat from Latin America and South America because of the threat now that the U.S. has imposed of we're now going in and taking care again of the territory that is closest to us. And that has also been affecting the U.S. with illegal immigration and with violence. Again, the U.S. has also brought arms and armed a lot of these groups. I don't deny that, but the US has finally refocused itself towards Latin America. However, speaking of China.
I was going to say something.
Okay, go.
Yeah, there was talk that there was a backroom deal between the U.S. and China for China to pull out of the North and South American regions and stop having so much influence in the region. I don't know if it's true or not, but in certain countries, their influence, they have pulled out a lot of investment from the region. And specifically with Maduro, I don't think Maduro is not getting the kind of help he thought he was going to get from China. So I don't think Sheinbaum's going to get any help either. She's really being isolated now.
And I was saying, however, speaking of China, from Visionaire, in the near future, residents of Taiwan will receive a brochure explaining how to behave in case of emergencies and a possible attack on the island by the Chinese army. This was reported by the Ministry of Defense of Taiwan. In particular, it contains information on what supplies to stock up on, what to put in the emergency kit, and how to behave when encountering enemy soldiers. Any reports that our people have been defeated and the government overthrown as a result of the invasion will be false. The instructions say.
There is a ton of news coming out of the China-Taiwan region right now. I grabbed a few posts here. We're going to kind of go through them, but something's definitely going on. And with Ukraine coming to an end, Venezuela kind of maybe coming to an end with Maduro stepping down. So they'll have all those military assets to put to other regions, as well as a temporary peace within Israel. You're going to really think that Mexico and China, the pressure is going to be amped up. I think with China, the U.S. is going to try to befriend Russia. And that's the way they're going to do that in the short term. I think they want to focus on Mexico first, but I know there are a lot of China hawks within this administration, and a lot of people that are potentially going to take over in 2028 are also China hawks. So a war with China is not out of the question. How it would start is Taiwan. Things are being ramped up. The U.S. is sending a ton of missile defense over to Taiwan right now, which is a little crazy because the U.S. has always recognized Taiwan as part of China. Because China has made them recognize them as part of China. Them sending military weapons and creating this alliance with Japan, the Philippines, and really militarizing that region is really telling China, Taiwan's no longer yours.
And we have also seen recently and reported on Japan and Japan's answer now with this new prime minister who is quite a lot more based towards support for Taiwan and starting to some fighting with China regarding Taiwan and what they plan and how they plan to support as well. So it is interesting to see that pole of the world also moving towards actually recognizing the situation at hand.
Yeah, as you're starting to see this multipolar world kind of develop, you're really seeing the U.S. Implement their will within Mexico, South America, through El Salvador and Argentina. And with China, I don't really think they want a war. I think they want to win through elections. They're going to want to get Japanese candidates elected that are friendly to China, and they're going to want to get Taiwanese candidates that are friendly to China as well. The polls are shifting more and more into China's favor every year. They almost won the last election in Taiwan. And if they had done that, possibly Taiwan would just naturally rejoin China. I think you give them another 5 years of just investing money. The question is the Chinese economy strong enough to kind of throw money to all these countries to win foreign elections for them? The last Japanese prime minister that was shortly in there was also very favorable to China.
Because this one is favorable
to the U.S. and militarizing, and the Philippines are militarizing. But China would be smart to not start a war and just invest a lot of money into trying to win elections and get favorable governments into these countries, and then maybe have those countries demilitarize themselves.
Because from Marinafal, America just armed Taiwan, as you were saying, with a $700 million Sky Shield. The U.S. is shipping Taiwan a new missile defense system straight out of
there before you continue. And we have to remember when Nancy Pelosi went over to Taiwan, this was a huge international incident because American politicians weren't supposed to go over to Taiwan, the U.S., and a lot of the international community was not recognizing Taiwan as a country because China was recognizing Taiwan as part of China. This has always been the line for the last decade. The fact that they're now militarizing Taiwan is huge. This is a huge shift in policy. This has to be absolutely getting up the neck of the Chinese.
The NASAMS or NASAMS, built by RTX, locks onto threats fast and hits harder than anything in Taipei's arsenal. Only Australia and Indonesia have it in the region. It's the second weapons deal in a week after a $300 million in jet parts. Trump signed off. Beijing is furious, and Taiwan just leveled up its defenses while pretending it's business as usual.
Yeah, and this was very important for them to do it at this specific moment because just over the weekend, China was doing their biggest military drill, kind of blockading Taiwan, and not with an open blockade, but just they had dozens and dozens of military war vessels surrounding them where they had planes go into their airspace, a lot more than usual. Usually Chinese will fly one or two airplanes into the airspace and a couple boats at any given time just to kind of test their defenses. But now it was like a full-fledged military arsenal kind of went around Taiwan on the sea and in the air. So Taiwan really needs to start amping up their military defenses. Otherwise, China may invade.
And from Steve Surfaro, hello, how are you? Thank you for being here. Says Taiwan companies like TSMC I've spoken to don't seem to be worried about a China invasion.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to have to see what happens. Obviously, I would be extremely worried about a China invasion with warships surrounding your country over the weekend, airplanes going overhead. They've been doing this for years, just not to the extent that they have. And now with the U.S. sending military missiles there, that's sending a signal to China that this is American territory. I think things are definitely amping up in that region. And there's just been a lot of news coming out over the last 3 or 4 days about different things that are amping up and kind of micro stories. I chose these bigger stories to kind of paint the picture that it's a region that we definitely want to keep an eye on right now. I think China would be smart not to start a war, though.
But with Taiwan, it has been over the past few years, like something big is happening, then nothing happens. Something's going to happen, then nothing happens. China wants the trips, then they kind of shut up.
The problem has been that the U.S. has been really spread thin. There's been a ton of wars around the world, whether it's conflicts popping up in Ukraine, the Middle East, what's going on in Venezuela with the biggest military deployment of troops since the Iraq War. But with all that stuff possibly simmering down, they're going to be able to refocus their efforts, whether that's on Mexico or whether that's on China. And we also have to remember, this isn't just Taiwan and China. And the company the chip manufacturer in Taiwan, may not be worried about it, but with a huge military presence by the U.S. being put in the Philippines, in Japan, and other countries in the region, it's not for those particular countries. It's because of what's going on in Taiwan.
And Steve Surfaro also says China is trying to get their large-scale Osprey-like drones that carry 5 to 10 people in place to help a potential invasion.
Yeah, China's military, I don't know if they're ahead of the game, but they're not so heavily invested in antiquated equipment like the U.S. is. They're focused on small troop deployments, things like this, vehicles like the vehicle he just mentioned. They're focusing on drones. They're focusing on this new age of warfare that's kind of coming, and they're funding it in a much different way than the U.S. is funding it. The U.S. is funding it through direct investment in military contractors, which isn't very financially viable for the long term. China's investing in the military through companies like DJI, where they can sell their drones around the world, make a huge profit, and then reinvest that into their military with the exact same technology DJI is actually investing in and developing.
Yeah, and we reported, I think, on that drone story a few weeks ago. And Steve Surfaro also says China has also finished their first drone aircraft carrier, which I think we also spoke about.
Yeah, we talked about that the other day.
But saying that maybe it wasn't as fancy as they want to make it seem, which is a play that China does a lot. They will come out with these big things and big showy during their military parade. I believe they showcased it off, wasn't it? Yeah, they showcased a bunch of things during their military parade. However, once you go into the actual technology and the actual way that things work, same as happens a lot with China, it looks very good on the surface, but then maybe doesn't work or has stolen components or stolen info on how to have built it.
Yeah, I disagree with the first half of the statement. The second half of the statement is right. Yeah, a lot of their components is stolen technology, but we're seeing in the Ukrainian war that the best drone technology right now is coming out of China. and Iran and Russia as well. And yeah, okay.
Speaking of Russia, from World at War, Russia now is preparing an attack on Poland. Poland's chief of staff, of general
Okay.
staff. Okay.
Let's kind of stop it here. I don't think Russia is planning any of these attacks. The thing was that these peace negotiations from Russia and the U.S. to end the Ukraine war kind of came up today. These stories popped up yesterday, and I think the EU and the UK kind of knew they were the U.S. was having this potential deal to end the Ukrainian war. They don't want it to end. They want to keep it going until Trump's out of office and then escalate that war. That's why all these strange stories were kind of emerging. There's another story about lasers as well in the UK. We're going to talk about both of these, but I think both of this is kind of propaganda from the EU to kind of keep this war going. They do not want this thing to end.
So Poland's chief of general staff, General Wojciech Kukula, issued a stark warning on November 17th, declaring that the country is in a pre-war state due to escalating hybrid threats, including cyber attacks and sabotage acts widely attributed to Russia. Attributed again. This comes in the wake of a confirmed explosion that damaged a key rail line near Warsaw over the weekend, which Polish authorities have labeled as a deliberate sabotage.
Okay, so I actually researched this story more on my own, and what I found out, it was 2 Ukrainians that sabotaged the rail line. What the Polish authorities said is they fled into, I believe it was Belarus, and that they were paid by the Russian government, even though they didn't capture them. So I don't know how they questioned them, but that's why I thought the story was a hoax. It was actually came out in the details. It was actually 2 Ukrainians that they suspect of doing this, but that they were paid by special intelligence within Russia. That's why they're trying to blame the Russians through a third party. With these possible negotiations coming to a conclusion with the U.S., Russia, and Ukraine, I just don't see any truth in the story.
Do you want me to play the video or no?
Yeah, we can.
What is it? I think it's just
I haven't seen it.
They're
I
bait.
can't remember. I got it for the headline though.
I think it's just like a miss out. Is that a miss? What is it?
Yeah, that's in the sound. Okay, that's pretty good. I also have to say there's been rumors coming out of the first nuclear cruise missile ever developed, possibly by Russia. Russia actually has the most advanced missile technology in the world. They have one missile that can't be hit by any air defense because it is just too fast. They've actually used that missile within Ukraine and they've proven it out. This nuclear missile would be able to fly around the world for days and avoid radar because it could be remote controlled around radar systems. It's very interesting. It would be a huge jump in military technology. So if that gets proven out that the Russians have that, it would show that Russia maybe has a lot more military tech than originally suspected. They also have the biggest nuclear arsenal in the world.
Because I think maybe a year ago, I think we were saying that Russia maybe didn't have the military capabilities, but then a lot of these things have been coming out afterwards, I'm guessing.
No, they've always had very good missile technology was the thing. The thing is, a lot of people thought their military was going to be antiquated, but they're managing to really develop a lot of new military technology on the battlefield in conjunction with China. So,
And Sidekick says, I heard rumors of Japan being mad at China.
oh, yeah. I mean, this new president within Japan, I really like her. She's very conservative, very based. She's going directly at China, and she's not mincing her words. The Chinese government has a long history of not liking Japan. That being said, the conservative leader in Japan, her power base isn't really secured, so she could lose power if there's another election or they kind of vote her out. She really needs to somehow reassert her power base if she wants to continue to be in power. So I don't know how long she's actually going to be in there, but as of right now, I kind of do like her.
And continuing with those that narrative that was maybe forming about Russia is going to attack the EU and the UK, From Sky News, Defense Secretary John Healey says British forces were hit by lasers while tracking a Russian spy ship on the edge of UK waters north of Scotland.
And yeah, we have to just remember, I had seen this story yesterday. I'm like, there's a ton of stories yesterday coming up from the EU saying Russia's going to attack us, whether it was Poland, the UK, Germany. I picked a couple of them. None of them really had any validity to it. And this particular one was lasers. Well, the US is constantly using lasers from space to scan different regions like China, like Russia. Most times when lasers are used, they're actually not lethal or not dangerous. So the fact that you're using a laser, I mean, I don't know if this is even true. And if it is true, it's not some kind of deadly futuristic laser.
As I speak, a Russian spy ship, the Yantar, is on the edge of UK waters north of Scotland, having entered the UK's wider waters over the last few weeks. This is a vessel designed for gathering intelligence and mapping our undersea.
And it says UK's wider waters. When he says that, I tend to think that that's international waters, and that's not actually the UK's waters if it's in international waters.
Cables. We deployed a Royal Navy frigate and RAF P-8 planes to monitor and track this vessel's every move, during which the Yantar directed lasers at our pilots. That Russian action is deeply dangerous, and this is the second time this year that this ship, the Yantar, has deployed to UK waters. So my message to Russia and to Putin is this: we see you, we know what you're doing, and if the Yantar travels south this week, we are ready.
Yeah, and I think it's just the UK and the EU trying to continue this war. They do not want a negotiated end. Also, I have to say, I've been reporting on this quite a bit, and there are a lot of insiders within the administration that kind of realize that the city of London is the big problem. That's where a lot of the global intelligence agencies are based out of. Both Trump and Putin are focused on them not as friends, but as enemies, and they realize that. So a lot of the moves Trump has kind of been making has been to shift the UK to a different value set, but also to defang a lot of these organizations based out of the city of London. One channel that goes into this a lot is the Promethean Action. It's a great YouTube channel, and yeah. Okay.
Sorry, I was trying to moving on to...
well, one more thing maybe I'll say about that. If we see any action in the EU and they say Russia launched a missile or a drone or a laser, I'll be very, very skeptical of that. They may even use that to launch more troops into the Ukraine to continue this war at all costs. So any news coming out that Russia's attacking the EU right now, especially when they're negotiating into the Ukraine war, would be very contradictory, I would think.
But now moving on to a different war that is also still happening. One of the many wars that Israel is trying to fight. From DD Geopolitics, Israel is now claiming Hamas is operating inside Lebanon and has begun striking targets in Ain al-Hilwel, one of the region's most densely packed Palestinian refugee camps. The IDF says it hit a Hamas training compound, but this is a massive escalation, if true, because Ain al-Hilwel is in Hamas territory. It's controlled by Fatah factions and local militias, and Lebanon security services treat any foreign military presence as a direct threat to sovereignty.
It seems like Hamas is this organization. Israel can say they're in any country and we can hit anywhere we want, and we have a free pass to do that. They have also invaded Lebanese territory to build a wall. We showed that yesterday on my show. It's on Lebanese soil, 1 kilometer in. The Israelis should have built that on their own soil. That's going to inflame tensions. They've not only built that wall now, so it would be very hard for the Lebanese to kind of hit back, but now they're hitting inside of Lebanon. The day the Palestinian peace deal came in, Israel started hitting Lebanon. Now they're escalating those tensions even more. This is why Saudi Arabia is so important to that region. They need to get an alliance of countries that are economically aligned and that will put pressure on Israel to kind of stop these forever wars and can maybe give Israel some security guarantees in the region without the U.S. having to be there anymore. The U.S. needs to withdraw funding and withdraw from that region, but in order to do so, they need to make sure there's an alliance of countries that can play friendly with Israel.
Yes. Do you want me to keep going or no?
No, that's pretty good.
Okay.
And was that all the war stories? Because that was quite a bit.
We still have a few more to go
Okay, there.
about technology.
The two big sections are war and Epstein tonight. So we're still in the war section. I didn't realize there were so many. And there's a lot of them I had to pass on, actually, because I just had too many at a certain point.
But now, back to the UK from Lord Bebo. The UK's Ministry of Defence now asks citizens not to connect their devices to Chinese cars as they transmit all information to China, something I have warned about.
Okay.
Authorities have also placed stickers on Chinese cars.
I'm not even worried about China here. Everybody knows China is not good and we don't want their technology necessarily. If we're using it, we already know it's kind of dangerous.
But I don't know if a lot of people actually know
I'm
that.
more worried about, well, the thing people don't know about is the UK government itself, the
Yes.
EU government itself. They're spying on you on every device, whether it's American, Israeli, Chinese. They've passed legislation where they can actually spy on you, and then they have legislation to prosecute you for memes or anything else they want. The Chinese government, if they get your data, yes, they can do nefarious things with it, but they aren't going to be able to really touch individual citizens in these countries. The UK government or the EU government is going to be able to directly arrest you from doing illicit spying on their citizens. The biggest threat to the citizens in a lot of these countries are their own governments themselves, or the secondary layer of government, which would be the EU, which is the non-elected government within these EU countries.
But at the same time, I would ask, if that is the case, then why did you allow the sales in the first place? Why was there not some sort of control beforehand? Which is what I was warning about here in Mexico with the entrance of BYD and a lot of other Chinese companies, electric vehicle companies. Why isn't the government initially putting tariffs or sanctions or checking what's coming in with this cars?
I'll tell you why. Because
TikTok.
they want to work with these Chinese companies to spy on their own citizens. The Chinese companies say, as long as you let us sell there, we'll spy on your citizens for you and give you the information. They're working together. And this is the same thing that the EU is currently trying to do with American tech companies. They're trying to say, oh, we're going to ban certain tech companies, but if you'll spy on our citizens for us, we'll give you their online data. So.
But apparently now it is not just China because, according to International Cyber Digest, unremovable Israeli spyware found on Samsung devices. Samsung faces backlash over App Cloud, an Israeli-developed app pre-installed on budget Galaxy A and M series devices. Investigations reveal the app is embedded in the operating system, preventing full removal. Even when disabled, App Cloud remains on the device, reappears after updates, and can covertly install additional software.
And Samsung is a South Korean country, so it's very interesting the Israeli government has spyware that are unremovable on that. That being said, there's a lot of governments that have a lot of spyware on a lot of different phones. So, and
I will say with Israel specifically, they do have or did have a big part in a lot of the tech sector and a lot of app development specifically. There's a lot of Israeli apps out there that people use.
Hold on. Now, I'm not going to go that far to defend Israel.
I'm not defending it.
They had pagers that were blowing up.
Again, I'm not defending it, but I'm saying it's not. I wouldn't be surprised if it's not just this app, but there's a lot of apps because the tech sector in Israel was so big and so entrenched within the US one as well.
Actually,
so there is a lot of app developers in Israel. So again, this might not be the only one, and it's unremovable, probably because it's important for the Samsung infrastructure. But again, I'm not surprised by it because I don't think it's as...
No, but a lot of people don't know that the biggest tech sector is actually in Israel. It's as big, if not bigger, than Silicon Valley. I believe it's bigger now because of the amount of investment that's actually coming in there. A lot of the Silicon Valley groups actually get their investment from these Israeli groups. So it's a very interesting connection there. And a lot of people don't know about the tech sector in Israel. Mm-hmm. It's absolutely massive. It's absolutely connected with the government and a lot of spy agencies.
And with the U.S. as well. Yeah. The U.S. tech sector and Silicon Valley. And now I think there's a story. There's like a few stories that are about the infighting and the involvement with Israel.
I think I had two transitional stories before we got into
transitional.
Until we got into Epstein, and there's a lot of Epstein
stories. From Megatron, the panic for Israel and Jews continues as they lose influence on the U.S. right wing. CNN anchor Jake Tapper says he reached out multiple times to J.D. Vance's office for comment and for condemnation of Nick Fuentes, but they refused to respond. Tapper then goes on to berate J.D. Vance for defending Buckley Carlson and the young Republicans who had their group chats leaked weeks ago.
Yeah, the fact that the CNN is talking about Nick Fuentes is a little bit crazy, especially when they wouldn't mention his name for years.
Of Fuentes or Carlson, or even condemned either of them. Vice President J.D. Vance, considered the next leader in the MAGA line of succession. He's no stranger to questions about Republicans espousing anti-Semitism in the last few months, following the Young Republicans texting scandal, which was first reported by Politico, which included one message where one of the Young Republicans said, quote, "I love Hitler." Vice President Vance characterized those expressing outrage as, quote, "pearl clutching." And the vice president repeatedly referred to the participants as kids, even though the ages of the people in the group range from 18 to 40. Fuentes is, of course, a Nazi of a more loathsome order than those on that text chain. And he has a history of going after not just Jews, but Vice President Vance. He said a number of nasty things about his wife. Vance himself called Fuentes a total loser in a 2024 CBS interview before the election, after Fuentes attacked his wife, Usha Vance, and her Indian heritage. Here's just one of these vile moments. A quick warning to our viewers. This condemnation of Vance by Fuentes is not pleasant to listen to.
Now they're all in favor of a fat race.
So it's very funny that they're playing Nick Fuentes on Jake Tapper's show on CNN.
Well, I'm going to kind of explain this in a minute because there is a civil war or infighting going on in the left as well as the right right now. And the left and the right, most radical groups, are kind of horseshoeing together and talking about forming a political party. And they're actually taking action by starting AIPAC. And Nick Fuentes is actually the one doing this. So now CNN is not only having to attack J.D. Vance, which is potentially the next conservative candidate, but also Nick Fuentes, because he is the one kind of organizing the unification of the left and the right, at least amongst young people. And we have another article coming up that we'll talk about that.
Race mixer who's married to a Jeet who named his son Vivek.
Now, this week and last, I repeatedly asked Vance's office for any comment about this internal war about Fuentes, specifically about Tucker Carlson platforming Fuentes, and there was no. It had to do with another member of the Carlson family, Tucker's son, Buckley, who works for Vance. And Vice President Vance attacked
I didn't watch the end of this clip. The fact that Tucker Carlson's son works for J.D. Vance is very interesting. And J.D. Vance has been lining up with the America First movement lately.
Some rando on Twitter as a, quote, scumbag, because this woman claimed that Tucker's brother idolizes Nick Fuentes and questioned whether Tucker's son, Buckley, who works for Vance, is a vile bigot, too. We here at CNN have absolutely no idea if Tucker's relatives feel any way about Fuentes. But it is clear from recent Twitter posts that his brother, also named Buckley, supports Tucker's platforming of Fuentes. Again, in August 2024, a few months before being elected, Vice President Vance...
It just sounds like a lot of gossip that he's talking about here, the way he's he's throwing out keywords like, oh, he's a snotsy, he's this, he's that. Okay, Buckley, Tucker's son's working for J.D. Vance, and he doesn't like Fuentes.
And the fact that the right and for America First, MAGA, all of these people involved in all of these ridiculous scandals and infighting are letting the left do this and giving fodder to them instead of actually focusing on the important issues for the midterms is insane to me.
Well, it's not necessarily that insane because there's new power bases forming between boomers and young people on the right and on the left. So we're going to kind of get more into this as we go through the articles. But I think we had a different article that I just kind of threw in there for a minute. Or article.
Okay. Because I do have a lot more to say about the infighting.
Well, we're going to get back to it
yes,
with the clip that I have of Fuentes talking about creating a uniparty, which is very interesting.
And I have comments about that as well. But quickly, Steve Strufaro says Israel has some of the leading AI analysis hardware. One company is Hilo.
Yeah. And they really, really downplay their tech sector. And a lot of people just don't know what's going on inside of Israel and how far their tentacles reach. I really think that most of the strings tie back to Israeli tech firms from Silicon Valley through the money.
And Steve Strufaro also says all they need to do is play the JDA advanced clip meme that'll shut Fuentes down. But let's go to Canada and see how they're messing up, because we haven't talked about Canada in a while, and it's just a S show over there. From Kirk Lubimov, the ideological buffoon David Eby has opened the Pandora's box that may destroy Canada. He's the premier of British Columbia. Now, Alaskan tribal nations are claiming rights to Canada's resource projects because they use Canada's northwest coast at some point, makes them the Aboriginal peoples of Canada under the Constitution Act. A group of Alaska tribal nations is going to the BC Supreme Court, as they have been allowed and told essentially to do, to demand a seat at the table in Canadian resource development, including a mine expansion that is among the nation-building projects Ottawa has selected as pivotal to economic development. The Alaska groups argue that their historical use of what is now North northwestern BC makes them Aboriginal peoples of Canada under the Constitution Act, saying that the status should guarantee them the same rights to consultation as Canadian Indigenous groups.
Okay, and this is
And we said this was going to happen, and this was one of the stupidest things that British Columbia and Canada could have done. But
well, this is actually, I think there's a bigger conspiracy going on here because they're working with the UN, and the UN implemented laws that they suggested countries could take on. No country actually took on these laws except for one province in BC, which was BC in Canada. And now you're having all these tribes from the US on the southern border, tribes within Canada, and now Alaskan tribes all saying this land is our land. They're even laying claim to Kamloops, which was a major economic center of British Columbia. I mean, if this goes through and they're able to actually enshrine this into law, and they've already given some of the land back to these Aboriginal tribes, setting the precedent for BC courts. It's currently being challenged in the Supreme Court. But if the Supreme Court holds that ruling, it becomes law in Canada, and you're going to see thousands of cases kind of pop up. You will own nothing and be happy. This is actually how they were planning to implement it. A lot of people talked about it for years. How would they actually do it? When the UN first brought in these Aboriginal laws, they thought this is potentially how they would dismantle governments and things of this nature.
And for years, a lot of people on the right were warning and saying, stop doing the land acknowledgements because you're essentially saying you can lay claim to this land and it is actually theirs. And now they're actually doing it in a legislative manner and in an actual manner where they're ceding private property, others' private property, individual citizens' private property to the First Nations.
Yeah,
so whoever lays claim to it, apparently also Alaska now.
And under the UN law, it's very obvious these Aboriginal tribes have the right to the land. So if this ruling stands within Canada, literally, Canada is not going to be a country anymore. And then you have Alberta potentially wanting to separate. If Alberta separates and they start taking salami slices off of Canada through Aboriginal tribes, you're going to see one province after another want to join the United States because the United States will be able to protect their land rights from Aboriginal tribes.
Mm-hmm. Well, now in this sense, I guess Alaska could become also part of Canada. Now, maybe it's reverse. It's a reverse Uno play.
No, no part of the United States is.
No, I mean, like, because they're laying claim to that land. So they're saying that's Alaskan territory now. That's part of the U.S. now. Ridiculous. And they're not the first tribe from the U.S. that are trying to do this in BC or within Canada. We did report on stories of other tribes also laying claim to Canadian land.
This is one of my favorite topics to actually keep updated on. So if you watch our show on a regular basis, you'll see I'm constantly talking about how they're taking private property away from Canadian citizens and giving it back to Aboriginal tribes. There is a lot of intricate weaving of Canadian law where they're really trying to create a socialistic society, and they currently have a government in power that is allowing that to happen. So that's the model for the rest of the world. So you might think Canada is some fringe country on the edge of nowhere, but the things that happen there are important because that gives a template for the UN to implement in other countries.
And some other countries that could try or might have started already trying to implement similar things with land acknowledgements, with an indigenous movement, as they call it here in Mexico, would be Mexico, a lot of Latin American countries, but also Australia, New Zealand, and other places that do have the reverence right now for Aboriginal tribes and First Nations. But let's see what's happening in Ohio. I don't know how to segue to this story.
Let's go into it.
It's not connected to anything.
This was just something I found interesting, and I think this is the last story before we go into all the Epstein stuff.
Yes. So from 10 WBNS, Ohio lawmakers introduced new act centered on DNA testing at birth. The testing would help confirm both maternity and paternity and would be offered, not mandated.
Yeah, I think this is a great idea, and there's no reason not to do it. When I was investigating this story, up to 30% of non-married couples within Ohio, the father is actually not the father, but he's told he is, which is creating massive court cases that are going on for decades. It's having the financial collapse of these men, as well as a lot of these people are being thrown in jail, and only after they get out of jail can they demand a DNA test, and then they're found that they were never the father. They should have never had their finances taken from them, and they should have never been thrown in jail. So to avoid all that, Ohio is suggesting mandatory DNA testing for all non-married couples.
They could just bring Maury back and say, you're not the father or you are the father.
Let's play the video, though. I think was there a video? Yeah.
No, I mean, this is from an article, but I don't know if we can play it because it's theirs.
Oh, okay.
But I can read. Ohio parents could soon be offered genetic testing for their newborns under a proposed bill aimed at confirming.
And 1 second, I believe it had passed now, if I'm not mistaken. I think this was a little bit older of an article.
No, from 2 days ago.
Okay.
Under a proposed bill aimed at confirming parentage and preventing long-term family disputes, State Representative Josh Williams introduced the Right to Know Act, which would require hospitals to inform parents of the option for DNA testing immediately after birth. The testing would help confirm both maternity and paternity and would be offered, but not mandated. Parents have the right to know, Williams said. This allows families to establish early
Yeah, and when I was researching
and
the
avoid
story,
costly and emotionally draining legal battles years down the line.
and I was watching, I was investigating this on YouTube and seeing advocates for this and people that were kind of against this, and it was shocking. There was one gentleman that needed to give blood before he was able to give blood. They just did the test. He found out he wasn't the father of his own son, who was now like 10 or 15 years old. It was crazy. On top of that, there was mass interviews of women saying they would never do a DNA test, and this is commonplace that women are refusing to do DNA tests. They're threatening to leave their significant others if they demand a DNA test because they're saying you don't trust me, and then I'll keep full custody of the kid, and basically making threats at that point. But when I looked at the statistics, up to 30% of these non-married couples, the father's not actually the father.
And that's why it's important to get married to a person that you actually want to be with, actually want to have children with, and have talked about all the important things, political, religious, raising children, etc., before you start reproducing yourself.
Kansas's record might not show it, but they are a good
and we know
football team,
women
and
are
they
very
pose a real threat
opportunist,
to Iowa
and they will
State.
do anything
Luckily,
to be
I
able
have
to
the
get
answers
by.
on how
Yeah,
Iowa
I
State
really
can
hope
shut
this
down
is passed
everything
in
that
Ohio,
Kansas
and then
does
this
well.
is taken on a national basis.
It would
This is
solve a lot of issues.
This is clawing back some
You
of
are
men's
Locked
rights.
On
I think men's
Cyclones,
rights are
your
constantly
daily
being stripped
podcast on
because of the
the Iowa
feminist
State
movement.
Cyclones.
This is one way to kind of fight back, so you're
Your
not
team every day.
forced to pay child support for a child that's
Welcome
not
into
yours,
Locked
number
On
one.
Cyclones, part of the
Number
Locked On
two, you know
Podcast
the
Network,
child's
your
yours, so
team
you
every
can
day.
give
Now the
blood
number one sports
if you need
podcast
to give
network.
blood in
I'm your
the
host,
future,
Nick Marvitz.
or
Thank
so
you for
you're
making
not
this your
thrown in
first
jail,
watch
but
or
also
listen of
because
the day.
maybe
I
you
appreciate
don't
it
think
more
the
than you know. Be
child's
sure to hit
yours.
subscribe
And again,
down below
for the
so you can
longest
once and
time,
for all that
thanks
it is
to
in
the
fact
feminist movement
Cyclone
and all the
State. Today we are
idiot
doing a
waves
deep
that they
dive
have.
on Kansas. I've watched some film.
Sorry, I
I
hear
have some
noise.
thoughts. We're going to start with their offense.
Go away. Sorry, something was playing in the background. Because of the feminist nonsense and because of putting women first and women's rights, etc., exactly, men's rights and men's ability to even parent has been completely forgotten.
Well,
it's a woman's body. It's her choice. Well, it's also
believe all
whoever
women.
believe all women. It's whoever reproduced with that woman. That's also his choice, and that's also his half of DNA in there. So they should have a choice, and they should know if it is theirs or not.
Yeah.
Because again, it would avoid a lot of issues down the line that we continue to see. But also, firstly, just get married.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just thought that was a really interesting story. If you're interested in that story, just type into YouTube the headline we have in that article, and you're going to see some crazy clips of both women and men's opinions on this thing. So,
And Psychic says the video background's still playing. Yes, thank you. I just noticed and turned it off. But do you want to get into the whole conservative drama?
yeah, bring the clip up here. I'm just waiting for you.
Yes, I'm trying to close everything else because, as you might guess, I have a million tabs open and it makes everything play slower. Here we go. So let's get into Nick Fuentes. From Grimaldas, Nick Fuentes says the GOP must be destroyed, not surprised, and replaced by a left-right populist coalition. The left has to give up immigration. The right has to give up on the free market.
And we're going to play this whole thing because I think it's fairly important. And I think there's a chance this actually starts to emerge. It's a very interesting concept. I had talked about something that was called MAGA communism emerging originally. This is very much in that vein. Only Nick Fuentes is talking about uniting the left and the right. And if you know horseshoe theory in politics, a lot of the issues the far left and the far right are actually agreeing on. This is the younger generation. This would usher in a form of socialism. That being said, the United States already has a lot of socialism involved in it. It's just corrupt socialism, so it doesn't actually work, meaning 50% of the US budget is spent on healthcare in one way, shape, or form, yet the healthcare system doesn't work appropriately. If you're spending that much money, I would agree it should at least work. What he's proposing here could actually catch fire.
And that's dangerous and it's retarded. And I think he's wearing the skin suit by proposing a lot of these things of the left, essentially. And he's essentially just doing favors for the left and completely forgetting. And even if he ever was part of what it actually means to be conservative or on the right, this goes completely against that. Talking about giving up on the free market is absolutely ridiculous.
He's not talking about giving up on the free market.
He literally says it. The right has to give up on the free market.
No, well, you're going to hear the context of it in just a moment. But when you have two corrupt corporatist parties in power just trying to cover up these Epstein files and a lot of other things, like the new generation is just going to want to clear out and burn it all down and bring in a new set of politicians that don't have these corporate interests. Now, it's not to say corporate interests aren't going to get their hooks into the new generation, but it's at least a way to clear out the rot of old.
But excusing socialism and saying this has never been tried before, it doesn't work because of the corruption,
okay, let's
retarded.
Watch the video before. He's not.
Well, no, but you said that.
He's not suggesting.
You're the one that said
he's not suggesting bringing in complete socialism.
Any sort of socialism eventually breaks the system, as we've seen in Canada, the UK, Australia, any country that has actually adopted socialist.
You can take off the headphones for a minute. Every single country around the world has one form of socialism in one form or another.
And it is one of their most broken systems in each case.
Name me, but if
Canada.
But that money not only continues to go into healthcare or whatever it is for that social system and that social safety net, it goes there, but it doesn't actually make it there, and they don't have a functional system because there's so much rot and corruption in the system. If you just cleared out the political rot, the amount of money that's going into the system, like healthcare or social security or other things, there's enough money to actually have a functional system.
You sound like the Democratic Socialists of America.
Okay, let's play the clip.
That's literally what Mamdani was arguing.
You're already paying for this. You've been paying for decades.
Exactly. Remove taxes and actually let people pay for their own healthcare. I agree
with removing taxes, but nobody's saying remove taxes.
Yes, they are. The conservatives, the actual conservatives are saying that they're right. The actual right is saying
they're not doing it.
Trump tried, and they're saying Trump tried, and all the rhinos and the neocons try to get it out of it.
Exactly. So you have to clear those politicians out somehow.
It's time.
Wait. Even though I don't want to hear him. Let's hear him.
Play it at regular speed because he talks fast.
It's 4 minutes.
Well.
Okay, don't copyright strike me, Nick.
On the table and say.
Pause it and rewind it. Now, I'm just going to play the whole thing in full because I think this issue is going to continue to come up, especially after the midterms. If the conservatives lose the midterms going into 2028, you're seeing a lot of people like Tucker Carlson, like Steve Bannon, like Nick Fuentes kind of go in this direction.
And we did see Nick Fuentes tell people during the last election not to vote for Trump and to vote for the Democrats. So we kind of know that he's been playing this game for a while now.
Trump is becoming a corporatist, so a lot of people are disenfranchised right now.
But this is not the way.
It's time to pound our fist on the table and say, it's our way or the highway. You've enjoyed the power and privileges for long enough. Where's ours? Where's our end of the bargain? So I love it. It's time to undermine the GOP. I said it in 2020. The GOP must be destroyed. Has to be utter. And yeah, they're going to say, he's a Democrat. He wants the GOP to be destroyed. The GOP serves the interests. The GOP, as presently constructed, serves the interests, the special interests, the donors.
Oh, now I can put it out.
I thought he was going to speak faster.
No, he's retarded. He speaks very slow.
Everybody knows that. It serves Silicon Valley and little tech. Palantir, Tesla, SpaceX, Anduril, Oracle. It serves Wall Street. That's why Ken Griffin gave them millions of dollars. It serves Miriam Adelson and the Israel lobby. This is who they work for. This is who selects the cabinet. This is who makes the policy. That's why they cut the corporate tax rate and they did nothing else. That's why they're shielding illegal immigrants from deportation as long as they're working on farms or on construction sites or in hospitality. That's why they're still providing for H-1B visas. That's why they're still providing for Chinese students. That's why they back down on the tariffs. That's why they back down on everything. So this is the blueprint. This is how we take over. And by the way, hey, and get a load of this.
Okay, and this is the important part.
Ro
where he's
Khanna
gonna-
and Thomas.
This is the important part where he kind of goes into this, and you're seeing people on the left also buy into this thought, and a lot of them are actually willing to make these compromises. That's why if the left splits and the right splits, that means possibly the biggest voter block would be this voter block.
Massey working together against the interests to compel the files. What do you think that has, a 90% approval rating? If you had progressive Democrats and nationalist Republicans working together, let's say to compel the release of the Epstein files, what kind of approval rating do you think that has? 90%? And what if they got together and they opposed foreign aid to Israel? What approval rating do you think that would have? 90%? What if they got together and worked on the basis of a common interest? Do you think that that Republicans or independents running under that brand, do you think that that would become more popular or less popular over time? 4 becomes 8, 8 becomes 16. It snowballs. And we need to propel someone into the White House that is just a populist. And here's where we're going to have to give. This is going to be the compromise. Very simple. The left has to give up immigration. That's simple. The left is going to have to give up. Look, we can have equity and we can have equality in the country. We can have civil rights. We can have all those things. But we have to close the damn borders. We have to close it. Too many illegal.
And the problem with this is the left is going to be willing to give this up. The reason they're willing to give it up is they want a working socialist model. So that's what they're going to be going towards. And they'll be able to point at this as a working model to kind of spread that. I think that's why the left would be able to compromise on that.
Legal immigrants. Too many legal immigrants. That has to be the compromise. The left has to give on immigration and the right has to give on the free market. If the right can come down on healthcare and on a social safety net and maybe on some subsidies for education, and if the left can come down on the anti-white open border stuff and they can agree that we have a country, that party will win 90% of the vote and rule for a century. That's the compromise. That's the populist compromise. Why is it that for the left, it's like they don't even care about anything else. It just has to be open borders. And on the right, it's like they don't care about anything else as long as it's foreign aid to Israel and war in the Middle East and war with Russia. That's the kind of program that we need. And that's what they're terrified of. They're terrified that the left and the right are going to come together on the basis of stop supporting Israel, on the basis of close the borders, on the basis of restricting money in politics and the influence of the oligarchs. That's what they're terrified of.
Okay, very interesting kind of proposal there. We'll see what kind of happens. This is going to be coming up more and more because he's just started a PAC. We're going to have Ben Shapiro talk about that in a bit. But usually when you talk about uniting the left and uniting the right, it's not going to happen. The way he's proposing it, you can see it possibly coming together. The Uniparty is not going to want that to happen. You also got to be wondering the fact that he's even able to propose these ideas. Is there other people that are uncensoring him at this point? Because he has faced mass decensorship now. He's all over the place.
It's funny that about a year and a half, a little bit more ago, a lot of people were making fun of James Lindsay for proposing that exactly this thing would happen. He called it the woke right and he got a lot of backlash about it. I'm not a super mega fan of James Lindsay, but I think his analysis on a lot of things historically is very good.
No, I don't like James Lindsay, but
he was completely right on this and on Nick Fuentes and on the turn that Tucker Carlson was taking. However, he was like a year and a half too early to actually expose it, which is now they're saying it themselves. But this has been talked about by other people that were analyzing it and they were called crazy. Now Fuentes is saying it himself.
Well, also you got to think if they're going to run a candidate, who are they going to run? And I was kind of talking to you earlier and I said, the two progressives that are kind of emerging as the top two progressives are Bernie and AOC. AOC is untenable for the right, but Bernie Sanders isn't, because there's a lot of disenfranchised Bernie bros that are now in the Conservative Party. So he's the tenable compromise candidate for the right. Now on the right, you have RFK and Tulsi Gabbard, who are
ex-Democrats.
Tulsi Gabbard, being a female, is a tenable compromise for the left. So you could see a possible ticket of Bernie Sanders, Tulsi Gabbard, if I were to guess, or maybe they put up some other candidate, but I could see a compromise is happening on both sides.
But what's happening now and what has happened, and I think, again, the assassination of Charlie Kirk it was the breaking point, I think, of what was holding everything together. And as Tim Pool said on his why he was disinvited to, or just not invited to the America Fest that's happening later this year, what has happened, and I'm going to use philosophy analogy, is the ship of Theseus. If you don't know what the ship of Theseus is, and I think this happened to America First and MAGA and to the whole movement in general, was the ship of Theseus says that there is the ship that makes a bunch of trips towards, it's a Greek arc, whatever. But it essentially says that how many pieces of the ship do you have to remove? When does it stop being the same ship if you're removing piece by piece as it breaks down? I think that is what's happening with MAGA, America First, and the conservative movement in general in the US after Charlie Kirk's assassination. Charlie Kirk's piece of that ship was so big and was so important and holding, I think, a lot of it together by building these relations and relationships with people that usually wouldn't talk to each other, both the rhinos, the neocons, but also the America First, the MAGAs, the people that like Trump, that didn't like Trump, and then also some of the libertarians, some of the Tim Pools, which were disaffected liberals. And he has left such a big hole in that ship that was that movement, that so many are trying to fill that gap, that it's just continuing to come apart. That ship is completely coming apart. And it has stopped, I think, being the original ship that a lot of people were actually for.
Well, I would agree with you, but I wouldn't say that ship hasn't quite sailed yet, and it's not quite disassembled. A lot of people are trying to
No, but I'm saying
a lot of people are trying to push Trump back to his base, back to the promises he made, away from these corporate interests, away from Marco Rubio and Susie Wilds. If he actually goes back in that direction, I think it takes the legs out from under this movement that they're trying to unite the left and right with. That being said, I don't know. It's almost seeming like these entrenched interests are really starting to become entrenched within Donald Trump, and he's not able to fulfill those promises that he made, number one. But number two, these Epstein files are really highlighting that.
And unfortunately, a lot of these crazies that want to do this, what did you call it? MAGA communism?
They were calling it MAGA communism, but that was the original thing that came out 2 or 3 years ago.
The woke right.
Like just because I do a lot of political research, it was on my radar. I had heard of it. I laughed at it when I first heard it. But 3 years later, it's kind of like, maybe it's here.
But again, James Lindsay talked about this with talking about the woke right and how the ideals eventually end up. I know you don't, but in this case, he was just way too early to what was actually going to happen and which ways they were going to move. But I think in general, he was pretty right about it. And now I think the main question is that ship, is the ship of Theseus, the MAGA ship of MAGA, still, after all the pieces have been removed and changed, and is it still the same ship, and does it still have the potential to continue with the same ideas and ideals that actually built it and built a lot of other political movements and was the great example to a bunch of other political movements around the world and parties that were formed and now are being pretty successful. Both, I'm talking Argentina, Chile, what's happening now with the elections there, in Germany, in Spain. All of these movements were kind of parallel or built upon the knowledge that was gained of what MAGA actually did. And that's what I continue to suggest here in Mexico. We don't even have the right. There's no right in Mexico. There's no conservatives, real conservatives, nowadays conservatives in Mexico. So I continue to say that is a great example, but now it's breaking completely apart.
Okay.
And they're letting it. That's the problem. They're letting it with this infighting.
Hearing this and seeing that they're actually making actions on the ground, they're starting to form a movement here and that it's viable. Two things I would be concerned about if this actually takes hold, and let's just theorize that they win an election. I would be concerned about the two things that I've been preaching for a long time, and that's digital ID and digital currency. Digital ID, the right faction would be happy if they won in order to keep immigrants out. That was the one thing that he said the right would want on that. And then the other thing I would be very concerned about is digital currency. In order to fulfill these socialist beliefs, they're going to have to be able to print unlimited money, at least within inside their own country.
Which is what the European Union is already trying to do.
What I would say is if this movement comes to fruition, I would be preaching from the hilltops. Just don't accept digital ID, don't accept digital currency. It becomes even more of a threat under this MAGA communism or whatever they're going to call this movement here.
And Psychic says, could the young Gen Zers be hung up more on political momentum rather than having political foresight? And that is also the problem, I think, that yes, the movement has to skew young and they have to start listening to the younger voices and stop listening to the very old rhino, Republicans from way back then that were still Republicans, and listen to the voices that came in, not deplatforming people, not censoring people or not uninviting people, rather having the debate and letting the best ideas come through. And we see the faction of the Ben Shapiros and the Israel First people not want to do that. And that is going to end up hurting the young people that do see the effects on the ground and are wanting, for example, free healthcare that is not free, it's paid through taxpayer money, or free whatever, or a better economic situation. They have to listen to that so it doesn't get taken over by the democratic socialists and the crazy people like Nick Fuentes.
We played a clip from that pollster Rasmussen the other day, and he was and he was saying both young people on the left and the right are having similar beliefs, number one, and number two, they want to see the boomers burn.
Yeah.
They want to see the billionaires burn.
And with that,
they want to see the system burn. This movement could be extremely popular and really bring young people out the vote.
But it has to be done right.
The guy from Rasmussen is very centrist, and the fact that he's seeing this, and now that this is kind of emerging, the dots are starting to connect that this is an actual thing that could emerge, especially in the midterms. If Donald Trump loses the midterms, or sorry, the conservatives lose the midterms, I think you may see this emerge as a possible option in 2028.
But again, I think with Charlie and Turning Point and the way that they had captured the youth, they were starting to talk about these issues. They were starting to listen to the requests and demands and worries of the younger Gen Z and that generation. And we also have, for example, Brett Cooper speaking out about this, Isabel Brown speaking out about this, a lot of other younger...
You're absolutely right about Charlie Kirk, but now he's gone.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, but he's gone, and now Donald Trump's moving to corporate interests.
Yes.
And a lot of the conservatives are becoming disenfranchised in real time.
Hold on, that's literally where I was going. I was saying they have to start listening to the younger ones because that's what's going to continue to lead the country. And if you don't want the country to fall into insane socialism, be it on the right or the left or whatever they want to call it, then they have to stop it with what Trump's ridiculous plans, but also the older political commentators, the older people that have Trump's ear right now have to realize that they're completely losing everything and they're fracturing everything even further. So bring in the young people, don't continue to alienate them and push them towards the democratic socialists.
But that kind of goes back to
social democrats,
what's been happening in Two Fuentes from the Ben Shapiro Rhino wing that's happening right now.
Yes.
They're consolidating around Trump. And it's pushing,
but there's a lot of others that are not.
It's pushing the big tent away.
But there's a lot of others that are not.
You're seeing the libertarians like Dave Smith. You're seeing Nick Fuentes. You're seeing Tucker Carlson. You're seeing Candace Owens. You're seeing a lot of these.
Candace Owens is crazy.
You're seeing a lot of these people now move away from that big tent movement.
Yes, and that's the problem. They have to recapture them. Don't let them go away because those right now are the more important assets you have.
Yeah, but the only way is to allow them to have a voice.
Yes.
And they're not.
But Shapiro and all the other rhinos and the people that want to continue as it was have to realize that they alone cannot continue and cannot sustain. And that what Charlie was doing and all the young ones were doing and continue to do is listen to those voices so they don't go away, scurry away to a worse option and lose them the midterms or the presidency.
We talked about possibly Bernie Sanders and Tulsi Gabbard. That being said, Nick Fuentes idolizes two people. That's Donald Trump and Kanye West. I wouldn't be surprised if he tries to put Kanye West up with somebody in 2028.
That would also be retarded.
Yeah, I'm not saying it wouldn't be retarded, but what I'm saying is I could see it happening.
Yeah, and if he does that, then he'll lose a lot of support again, and he becomes less of a worry. But right now, because he has
I've seen crazy things happen, like Donald Trump come down the golden escalator.
No.
No, he
That
had,
was not crazy.
He had less than 1% support when he came down.
Yeah, because nobody knew that it was
Everybody
even
knew who
happening.
he was.
No, but they didn't know what was happening, what was behind it, etc., until they started listening to him. Kanye is insane. He's off his meds. From Steve Surfaro says, Fuentes is not speaking. He's acting. Exactly. He's ignoring that the legacy House and Senate structure is the problem. Moving power back to the states is one viable solution that can happen quickly through Convention of States. And that's what
we've
Trump
been
was
talking
trying
about.
to do. That was what Trump was trying to do, to move certain things back to the states, but they have to ramp it up and focus on that for the midterms. That would actually win a lot of seats.
What they're doing, what's happening right now is they're completely trying to discard what Fuentes is saying here, and this has a chance to grab traction. They need to address this now. If they don't, it can be a serious concern. If you unite the left and the right, even if it's just young people from the left and the right that know how to use social media, it's going to be very concerning, and it could take down the entire system.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
not in a good way.
Let's continue.
Sidekick says NFD Nick Fuentes disorder. You have that right now, at least. And then you brought in Eva Vlardinger.
Okay, even just this whole thing started 3 years ago before Fuentes, and I thought it was a joke.
Well, not
this thing is
before
starting
Fuentes.
to get legs under it, and people better start paying
Well,
attention.
Fuentes was big 3 years ago.
He wasn't talking about this. It was
No,
another,
but it
an-
was obvious that that's where it's going to go.
It was two other guys that now live in Russia that started this idea of MAGA communism. But the way it's been evolving, they're still part of this movement. They're just doing commentary from Russia because they know they'd be targets within the United States. So.
And you did have this from Eva Vlardinger Brock. If you don't follow her,
we can kind of skip this one.
Okay, then we're gonna skip this one.
Just because it's getting late and we have so many Epstein
Yes,
stories.
now we're going into the whole Epstein thing, which could have been solved pretty quickly and easily, but every single interest that is scared messed it all up.
The reason I prefaced this all with the Fuentes thing and what he's suggesting is because this is becoming a serious problem for both Democrats and Republicans, and Trump is handling it in the most, in the worst possible way.
From Spencer Hakimian, Trump's spiritual advisor just got arrested for doing disgusting things to a 12-year-old.
Okay, yeah, and I just kind of preference this, that there are stuff in these files that people are going to get busted for. A lot of people on the right, that especially people that have access to the administration, are constantly saying, oh, there's nothing in these files don't matter. As we're seeing, there's arrest. People are reading the 10,000 emails that came out. There are high-profile names in there connected to other crimes. If more files are released, there are things in there, and these people like Benny Johnson, even Tim Pool, is not paying attention to these files like they need to be. These were just released yesterday, and a lot of things are coming out today about this.
Is this just him walking out?
Yeah.
So he's Trump's spiritual. Wasn't that a crazy lady that talked in?
He was a political advisor, I believe. Okay. And we can just go to the next one. And I'm just kind of showing that to say, there was a lawyer for one of the victims in the Epstein case that that already looked at the Epstein files. And he said Trump wasn't in there, but there are 12 extremely high profile people that would be going to jail for a long time if they're released. So if they're released now and these things are washed or too much things are redacted and no prosecutions come out of them, there's going to be another major problem for Trump because some people have already seen these files.
From Molly Ploufkins, no idea. When Bondi asked, will you release all the files within 30 days? She said, we'll continue to follow the law.
Okay.
And she has been a disappointment from day one.
Let's talk about what happened first. Every single Democrat, except for one, and every single Republican in the House and Senate voted on this Epstein bill to pass it, even though Donald Trump said not to. At the last minute, Trump said, okay, we'll release everything because he realizes everybody had kind of broken from him. That being said, as soon as he said that, I said, and a lot of other commentators said, the first thing he's going to do, because he doesn't want these things released, it looks like, is go to Bondi, open more cases, say you have to redact the files, you can't release them all. He not only did that, and this is her kind of saying that in not so many words, but also he went to another route to block the files with Mike Johnson, and we're going to be showing that clip as well.
We'll provide all the files by 30 days?
We will follow the law. The law passed both chambers last evening. It has not yet been signed, but we will continue to follow the law, again, while protecting victims, but also providing maximum transparency.
Madam Attorney General, the DOJ statement earlier this year saying that the files would not release mentioned the fact that the review of the documents and the evidence did not suggest that any additional investigation of third parties was warranted. What changed since then that you launched this investigation?
Information that has come for information. There's information that new information, additional information, and we will continue to follow the law, to investigate any leads. If there are any victims, we encourage all victims to come forward, and we will continue to provide maximum transparency under the law.
Okay, when she says new information, that means they're opening new cases. When they open new cases, they can stop the release of a lot of these files. They can redact far more of these files. There was rumors that the FBI was currently washing the files, taking a lot of people's names out of it. A lot of people are calling for these FBI agents because they were all working off of the same ledger to actually whistleblow on what was in the files and what are they asking to be redacted. So the fact that she's now opening more cases so they can redact more of this information, and this is exactly what people said Trump would do. He would go to Bondi, he would openly say release the files, and then go to Bondi and tell her to open more cases and redact and put a block on releasing certain files. And that's exactly what happened.
And we have also started seeing figures scurrying away that thought that they were safe, but apparently not.
And I like Trump. So like the best move for Trump is just release everything. I was just contemplating on this. I'm like, what in the hell is he doing? Just release the files, especially if people that have seen the files saying he's not in it. And the conclusion I possibly came to, because he's acting like his name's in the files. But everybody says his names isn't in the files. And before the last election, they didn't release anything of the files with his name in it. The only way he doesn't want these released, I was thinking, was the lawyer said there was 12 very, very high profile people, one possibly being the former prime minister of Israel. These people's names are in the files and can possibly be prosecuted. Some of these, if you look in these files, Donald Trump used to be in this network of people. What this network of people was doing was constantly blackmailing each other and blackmailing other people, and then asking people in the group, oh, how can we use this information to get what we need from this person to pass this legislation? Possibly if these 12 people are prosecuted, one of them have dirt on Trump outside of these files, and are telling Trump, if these files are released, I'm going to bring what I know and to the public's eye. That's because I don't understand why Trump's acting so guilty if his name isn't in the file. The only conclusion I could come to.
And if the Democrats didn't use it during the run-up to the election.
Maybe somebody that's in the file have dirt on Trump outside of those files. And if they're prosecuted, they're going to reveal that. And they've already threatened that, possibly.
Maybe. But someone that did step down is Larry Summers, who resigns from OpenAI board over Epstein ties. Former Treasury Secretary and Harvard president Larry Summers has stepped down from OpenAI's board amid growing scrutiny over his connections to Jeffrey Epstein.
And there was another clip of him, I believe, at Harvard, where he was apologizing in front of his class for his actions with Epstein and him being in the files. These people know they're busted. The problem is, if these files get massively redacted, because new cases are being opened and nobody's being prosecuted, this is going to land on Trump's head. These files not only now have to come out, but there has to be massive prosecutions off of these files. Before, if Trump would have just released them, even if nobody was prosecuted, I think that was enough to kind of move on. Now there's going to have to be massive prosecutions because people are going to suspect that these files have been washed.
So Summers said in a statement to the BBC that he was grateful for the opportunity to have served, excited about the potential of the company, and looking forward to following their progress. Summers, who was also once the president of Harvard University, said on Monday that he would be stepping back from public commitments over his ties to Epstein. The recently released emails showed Summers communicated with Epstein until the day before his arrest, Epstein's arrest in 2019 for alleged disgusting things of minors. In a statement, the artificial intelligence company said it respected Summers' decision to resign.
Yeah, and this is a non-partisan issue. When Fuentes said a minute ago, this is a 90% issue. He was right, because I was watching Pierce Morgan earlier, and they had 2 and 2 kind of usually that would involve in a debate. 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, and there was no debate because they all agreed on everything when they talked about these files. They need to be released. This is ridiculous. They went into every aspect of this. And I was going to bring up Watergate. Watergate, what happened under Richard Nixon, and it's a similar situation where these files in Watergate were being released and nobody was really paying attention for a year. And then it ended up in the impeachment or potential impeachment of Richard Nixon. Rather than being impeached, he stepped down. It wasn't because of what was in the files. It was because of the manner in which he tried to cover it up. So Trump could maybe potentially not last his term, not because he's in the files, but because of the way it appears that he's trying to cover it up.
And Psychic says blackmailing sounds like Hollywood activities. And I mean, it is something that all businessmen do of each other.
Yeah, and
like it's not like people would be, maybe some people would be surprised that Trump has done things like that before, but most of them have. And if anybody goes into those, like their own files or their own blackmailing activities, they'll find things.
But I'll say this, when I looked into the emails, I was shocked. There was no thing with grapes or these women, like everything keeps getting brought up in this 10,000 emails. What was there is people openly talking about how they're blackmailing each other, how they're blackmailing senators, how they got payments, how they have videos of tapes of people on video with other men or with this and that. And they were asking, what can we ask for in exchange to get this? I mean, they were openly talking about this. That's what's come out in this first set of emails, and it's a small group of powerful individuals. So that's what we know so far, and there's a ton of more stuff to come out.
And I think a lot of them might be scared of, Larry Summers, Trump, etc., is of the things that were being used to blackmail them coming out, not of them actually doing the blackmailing again, because I think that's almost expected. Unfortunately, that's almost expected of businessmen, politicians, etc. But it would be, I think, the blackmailing tools that they were using. If they came out, that would be what would shock most people.
I also just want to see these files released so we can see all the politicians that are in there. And I would like to see a populist movement of people actually not voting for them at the polling booth. That would be a renounding way to kind of implement power as the people.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that would actually help in a way to do this restructuring. That way we're talking that Nick Fuentes wants to be a communist, whatever. That would be a good way to actually restructure, but that is why they're all scared, because their power and their money might be going away soon if all this comes out.
They could
and the trust the people have in these.
They could restructure on their own, because both the Republican and Democratic Party are getting really old, and a lot of these people are going to be involved and entrenched in these corruption scandals. So possibly if these files are released and there are dozens or hundreds of names of politicians in here, this would force the Republicans and Democrats to recruit fresh blood that aren't corrupt and aren't tainted by these scandals.
And are younger. Rafa says, I'm back. Welcome back. We're still here. And Psychic says, basically a standoff. Yes. And who's more scared of things coming out, kind of game that they're all playing.
And then you have Fuentes over here in right field threatening both parties. And not only Fuentes, you have the AOC progressive wing threatening the Democrats, just like Fuentes is threatening the Republicans.
And we're also seeing the Democrats, they initially tried to use this, but then they noticed that a lot of their people as well were in it. So they've kind of calmed down a bit, or they're ending up with egg on their face, a lot of them, by demanding this and now being scared of the things actually coming out.
And we also have to remember, Trump was a Democrat for most of his life. And a lot of these conversations and filings happened actually before he was president. So the fact that Trump's name's in this group a lot, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a conservative circle. Just remember, his history is actually being a Democrat.
And you talk a lot about Susie Wiles.
I wanted to just play this. I talk a lot about her.
Yes.
And she is the main one corrupting Trump's administration right now. Her, Rubio, and a couple others. Most people that are in the know are focused on her. She's the one leading MAGA away from their base and into these corporate entrenched interests.
It's funny that I think when the election first happened and she got appointed, I think we praised her at some point.
I didn't know much about a lot of people that were being appointed that weren't high profile. I think in the beginning I may have praised her, but I didn't know a lot about her.
So from Shadow of Ezra, President Trump has now labeled Susie Wiles the most powerful woman in the world, saying she could wipe out any country with just one phone call.
Susie Wiles, she had a father, Pat Summerall, the great announcer. He was a great football player, became an even greater, the voice of the NFL, and he was supposed to be a tough cookie, and I believe it 100%. Most powerful woman in the world. She can take out a country, take out a country with one phone call. That's power. I don't know if I could do that, but she could. Thank you, Susie. Do you feel good about the job you're doing? Huh? She's never going to be satisfied. Susie Wiles,
Yeah, and she has taken out a lot of the populists and trying to block them out, like Tulsi Gabbard. She's doing a good job at blocking Tulsi Gabbard from getting a lot of things done. She's trying to do the same to RFK. She's not quite as smart as RFK, but she's putting a lot of lobbyists in political power positions in order to try to block RFK from doing what he needs to do. A lot of these wars and tensions that are escalating because of her and Marco Rubio and the military industrial complex, because that's where a lot of their interests lie, as well as the pharmaceutical companies. A lot of the lobbyists are directly attached to Susie Wiles, and that's how they're getting their tentacles into the administration.
Wiles. But continuing on the Jeffrey Epstein story, Speaker Johnson tells me he's deeply disappointed the Senate approved the Epstein files bill without making changes. Said he spoke to Trump about it tonight, saying they both have concerns.
The fact that he's so concerned, he just looks guilty here. It's like, just release the files at this point.
And that's the thing. I think that the handling of it, as you say, has not been ideal.
That even the Democrats realize at this point, fuck it, whatever's in there, just release it all. At least we're not going to look guilty. Trump and sorry, what's his name again? Mike Johnson are making this thing not look good.
Mm-hmm.
Any reaction to Leader Thune seeing the bill without adding amendments or changing it?
I'm deeply disappointed in this outcome. I think I've been at the state dinner. I don't know. I was just told that Chuck Schumer rushed it to the floor and put it out there preemptively. It needed amendments. I just spoke to the president about that. We'll see what happens.
So do you think he may veto it? You say you spoke to the president?
I'm not saying that.
Is he supportive of it in its current form?
We both have concerns about it, so we'll see. I'm standing with the Crown Prince.
Are you frustrated in the majority leader? Are you upset with the majority leader?
And he looks absolutely panicked there.
Yes.
And he must have known that Trump had come out and said, release the files. He can't be looking like he's going up to Trump to try to block a lot of these files from coming out. And then you see Pam Bondi coming out saying we're opening new cases. This is going to cause a lot of the files to be redacted. This is what a lot of people suspected Trump would do after he said release the files. He would go to Johnson and to Pam Bondi and try to block as many of the files as he could or wash the files.
And I mean, he could also, yes, he probably is upset because he looks guilty in some way, but it could also be because it got kind of passed without him being able to. I don't know.
I think everybody broke from him. He lost complete control of the conservative movement, and this is the first time everybody's completely broken from him.
Mm-hmm.
So that's concerning for him. But I think somebody in those files may have dirt on Trump outside of those files, and may be saying, if I'm prosecuted because of these files, you're going down with me. Because it's so obvious. Just release the files at this point and burn whoever is burnt in the files.
From Red Pill USA, Mike Johnson just said the quiet part out loud on camera after the Epstein Files Transparency Act crushed the House 427-1. Johnson smirks and admits he's already on the phone whispering to incoming Senate Leader John Thune. He's very confident the Senate will methodically amend the bill, which in plain English means they're going to crawl at a snail's pace, stuff it full of privacy protections, and guarantee certain powerful names in the elite, disgusting networks stay permanently hidden behind trick black
Even if you're going to do this, do not talk about it.
Again, I think it is panic.
And why Mike
panic for what? We don't really know.
Mike Johnson looks the most panicked of everybody.
So what am I to do as a leader in a situation like this? I call my counterpart in the Senate, Leader Thune, and I talked him through this with him and shared our deep concerns. And of course, they share those concerns as well. And so I'm very confident that when this moves forward in the process, if and when it is processed in the Senate, which there's no certainty that will be, that they will take the time methodically to do what we have not been allowed to do in the House, to amend this discharge petition and to make sure that these protections are there. The authors of the discharge did not allow us to do that here. That's the rules here. But in the Senate, they can correct it. So what am I?
Okay, and if they do that, there needs to be repercussions to anybody that votes to put amendments in this thing. We want it as is. Basically, they voted on on this bill. It went through almost unanimously, except for one person. That's almost unheard of for a bill to go through like that. The next step is for it to go to Trump's desk. Trump obviously has to sign this. If he doesn't sign it, the guilt's going to lie on him, and there's going to be a ton of backlash on him for it.
And however, then Attorney General Pam Bondi from the Bulwark said that she would refuse to release, and again, it's this playing around with what the release is going to mean and how they're going to do it, to release any information that would re-victimize the victims. I'm wondering whether that stands for, whether that stands after the passage of the law.
We can play the clip, but we have to also remember they said they were going to unredact the RFK files, the JFK files, and when they were unredacted, it seemed like these things were washed and there was nothing really in them. This is the same thing that we don't want to happen to the Epstein files. There better be 6 to 12 prosecutions off this, because one of the lawyers already looked at it and said, at a minimum, that's what's in there.
What was the question? The Attorney General has previously said that she would refuse to release any information that would re-victimize the victims, and I'm just wondering whether that stands, after the passage of this law.
Well, the law is
hasn't
signed into law yet.
What I'm looking, standing right behind this guy is failure number 1 and failure number 2. Failure number 2 said, oh, I have 10,000 files on my desk. I'm releasing them tomorrow. We have all kinds of videos. Oh, there's nothing to see here. And then we have failure number 2 that ran a campaign for over a year talking about how we're going to release the Epstein files and drain the swamp. We put you into power. And what happened?
And of course, we're going to protect victims, and the law as written allows us to do that. The law has carve-outs to protect victims and to protect information surrounding victims, which is what we do not only in this case, but in every case. So it's a fair question, but neither the House nor the Senate's version, the same version, suggested otherwise. So,
Thank you.
what was the question?
Yeah, and they're just playing games. And as soon as this kind of happened, before Bondi or Mike Johnson gave a statement, everybody suspected behind the scenes this is what Trump was going to do. This is a huge disappointment. If he's able to negotiate Ukraine, he's going to want that in the headlines, because this Epstein thing is blowing up in his face right now.
And speaking of blowing up on his face, I do sort of maybe agree with Johnson saying that it could be a national security risk. I do see how that could...
I don't. Not at all. This is too much. This is too important to the American people.
No, I'm not saying they shouldn't release it, but I'm saying the framing of it being a national security risk would make sense.
No, that
still
would
release it.
Normally,
but
that would
put in protections.
Normally, that would make sense until Pam Bondi said there were no third parties involved in this, and now she's saying there is, and we're reopening cases. And that's going in conjunction with this. Now he's saying there's third parties involved that we can't release. They had already said there previously wasn't. They're getting caught in so many lies right now.
But yes, Bondi said the Epstein files were on her desk. Bondi Patel released phase 1 to influencers. It's nothing new about it. Then the files were a hoax. Then Bondi said there weren't any files, and now they're a security risk.
All right. Number 5. National security concerns, okay? The discharge requires the Attorney General to release within 30 days, quote, classified information to the maximum extent possible. This ignores the principle that declassification should always rest, and always has rested, with the agency that originated the intelligence. Why? So that they can protect their critical sources and methods. It is incredibly dangerous to demand that officials or employees of the DOJ declassify materials that originated in other agencies, in intelligence agencies. All right.
This is going to blow up.
But again, if they were going to promise that, if they're going to run a whole campaign, electoral campaign over that, maybe they should have thought about that and considered the risks before they ran on it and said that they were going to do it day 1.
This is going to blow up
and
in
it's
Trump's
now day
face.
360 something.
Because for everything else, Trump's willing to go around all these agencies and kind of put in an executive order to kind of do what he wants. He can do that here. And if he colludes with these agencies to redact and block a lot of this information because his friends are in there or whatever else, people are going to say, why aren't you signing an executive order to be completely transparent here? This isn't a normal situation. Your entire midterm campaign could rest on this one thing. And not only your midterms, just look what happened to Richard Nixon with the Watergate scandal. It wasn't the documents themselves that had him resign. It was the cover-up after that had him resign.
And the Epstein files, all the people in it, all the corruption, etc., could have been a kickoff point to actually drain the swamp and could have given him what he needed to actually do what he promised he was going to do.
He could have followed through on that promise. You're right.
But Rafa says that nothing poses a greater risk than having disgusting people in positions of power. Exactly. That too.
And the part of the other problem is this: they painted the Democrats as these woke progressives that have no moral values, which I'm all on board with that, okay?
Yeah, they don't.
The problem is if these files are released and half of your party have no moral values,
or lied about their moral values, which would be even worse, because a lot of them paint themselves as these Christians, Catholics, they're full God and faith, but then we know there's disgusting things that go on in DC. But if it's fully exposed, then that fully breaks the system and the promises even more.
The one way around that is, even if your party was involved in this, if you were the one to release the files, then fire those people and then prosecute them, you would have came out smelling like roses here.
But let's see, I might actually agree with Fuentes on this part. From Grimaldes, Nick Fuentes goes off on Speaker Mac Johnson for saying the Epstein files would destroy the political system. That's the whole point of the Trump movement. And again, that's what I just said.
And I do agree with him here. And there's going to be issues with Fuentes coming up in the midterms and the next elections.
And again, just because I don't like him doesn't mean I can't agree on certain
things. But if Trump would stop being a corporatist and stop covering up these files, Trump could absolutely blow the midterms out of the water.
Yeah, it could actually help him.
All the power is in his hands right now.
And Mike Johnson says we cannot release all the files pertaining to this situation because it might permanently damage the political system. Why? Because it might undermine its legitimacy and credibility. If we found out that the government was being controlled using blackmail and bribery, because it would undermine confidence in our government, in our democracy. If we learned that our civilian elected leaders were not answering to the will of the people, but were actually being controlled by foreign governments, intel agencies, that our tax money, that our government, our military, our regulations are actually under the control of shadowy forces that are engaged in sexual trafficking and blackmail, working for God only knows who. Why would we want to maintain a political order based on that? That's sort of the whole point. We want this to destroy the political system. Were we not clear about that? That's the whole point. That's the whole point, by the way, of the Trump movement. The political system is not working for the people. The political system is not answerable or accountable to the people because the political system is corrupt. And at these bottlenecks, this is where intelligence, mercenaries, foreign governments, money is exercising undue influence in a way that is concealed from the public for an agenda that we don't know about and maybe we don't even understand. Our sovereignty, our freedom, our liberty, our independence has been stolen from us by this system. Why would we want to maintain this system? That's the goal. The system is corrupt. The system has to be destroyed. That's the whole point, is to undermine its credibility, undermine its legitimacy, so that it can be overthrown and replaced. And we're not calling for a violent revolution. We have elections in this country. That's what elections are for. We have a constitution. And if we have free speech, if we have our First Amendment, if we're able to access the public square on social media, then the will of the people should overpower the money. In this case, if we find out who was on the island, we're going to vote to replace everybody that was complicit in it. And that might give you some hope that we can peacefully replace the political system. That's the whole point. Johnson says we can't give away the whole game because then it might undermine the political system. Why? Because you're all guilty? Is that it? Because it's all true? Because you're all guilty and you know?
And it's funny because that's exactly what needs to happen in Mexico. That's exactly what Gen Z is asking for, but they're not doing and going about it in the way that it would actually work.
And
a lot of other countries as well.
This was such a small issue. Yes. And you're giving so much fodder to Nick Fuentes in this movement that's arising from the left and the right that may combine because of an issue that they have the power to solve right now.
And he's also right, like, again, Fuentes is right in some things.
Why is it taking him to speak up? Because nobody else is speaking up about this issue that's actually in a position of power.
Because there's too many interests as well within them, or donations, or etc. Like, for example, Ben Shapiro. From Americultist, Ben Shapiro is having a full-on panic attack over the America First Foundation set to relaunch under Nick Fuentes.
And I kind of threw this in here to show you that Nick Fuentes isn't just talking about these ideas. He's doing groundwork. That's why we need to start paying attention to what's happening. And the fact that he's actually reaching out to the far left from the far right. I mean, there's actually legs under this thing, and we're still a long way out from the next election.
And there's still a way to kick those legs out from under them, but it has to be done by people that actually want to talk and speak and not be afraid of whatever they're afraid of, losing subscribers, losing donations, etc.
Meanwhile, Nick Fuentes, who of course was glazed by Tucker Carlson rather famously. So Nick Fuentes has now announced that he is going to be launching an actual PAC, the America First Foundation. And apparently it is going to be supported by a variety of supposedly, quote unquote, America First figures. I say America First figures because, again, that phrase is semantically overloaded. Every American should believe that America comes first when it comes to our policy because, duh. But what they mean by America First is not that. What they mean
when he says duh, it's like he's the one person not putting America first. Israel has a pact. The fact that he's so against Fuentes having a pact, even though whether you like or don't like Fuentes, Ben Shapiro can have an Israeli pact here. Fuentes can have an American first pact. They can all have a pact. They all have a voice. They all have a right to speak. These cancellations of trying to cancel each other is absolutely ridiculous.
by America First is essentially a totally isolationist foreign policy, a complete overthrow of the idea of creedal Americanism, the idea that the Declaration of Independence actually defines what it means to be an American or the Constitution. And instead, it ought to be whatever Fuentes' peculiar definition of heritage represents. Apparently, according to the Free Press, the America First Foundation's latest tax filing lists Fuentes as its president, along with two board members. One is Jonathan Miller, a former White House correspondent for Blaze TV, who posted the day after last July's assassination attempt on President Trump. I'm not uniting with anyone except Christ and my brothers. I know stand with Trump, F the left, F the GOP, F the Secret Service, F the Jews, F democracy. God is with us. And also a white nationalist named Vincent James Fox, who said he was part of the Christian Taliban. Now, why do I point this out? Because the left is cheering the stupidity of Republicans for doing this stuff. They are loving every moment of this. Every single moment of this. Now, Fuentes wishes to bill, by the way, cleans out the actual principles of conservatism. Like, cleans it out. Legitimately, the only thing that you can say that Fuentes is conservative on in any sort of traditional sense is that he is anti-mass migration. That's pretty much it. On economics, he is not. And on social policy, by the way, he really is not.
It sounds to me, he's like...
But he's not wrong. He's not fully wrong.
He's got a lot of good debate points there. Mm-hmm. Why doesn't... Ben Shapiro's a good debater.
Yes.
Why doesn't he go and debate Fuentes rather than talking about his pact, rather than talking about his bad ideas, rather than trying to cancel him, rather than trying to get other people to cancel him? He tried to cancel Fuentes over 10 years ago when he had less than 1,000 subscribers, and he's still trying to do it today. But just debate the kid now. Also, I'm all for Fuentes maybe not having a pack if that's what we want to do, but let's get rid of all the packs. Let's get rid of the Israeli pack. Let's get rid of all the packs. Mm-hmm. But that's not what Ben Shapiro's suggesting. Ben Shapiro's suggesting, no, I can have a pack and my friends can have a pack, but that kid can't.
But also, if they do debate, if he does debate Nick Fuentes, if Ben Shapiro finally steps up or somebody finally steps up and actually debates him with the actual good points, there's a lot of things that go against Nick. And there's a lot of things that he has said that are retarded and make no sense and go against the founding principles that he so says and espouses he likes and wants to have, especially because, once again, he's a Catholic and that goes completely against everything that America is founded on and built on. And I think he would lose a lot of supporters and subscribers, etc., and people backing him and behind him if they knew what the actual plan was and what he says actually means or represents or signifies.
Well, it looks like by the way, Ben Shapiro kind of described that and who's involved in it. It sounds like a Christian nationalist pack. Mm-hmm. So I think it's going to have a big base of support. This isn't a Fuentes
Yes, but
pack.
if what we saw with Based Camp, and they did a whole two-part series about why Catholicism is not compatible with America and the American foundational principles, then that would easily destroy most of his movement because Nick Fuentes, and you were saying, I think last night, that Nick Fuentes still continues to be beholden to the Vatican and the progressive morals and the progressive changing of what we have seen with the Catholic Church and the Vatican itself and both popes now, apparently.
Well, yeah, and that's what I was going to kind of say. Nick Fuentes is kind of ambiguous, but he's been pointed to the Catholic Church like this is something that we should follow. The problem is the Catholic base and independent Catholic churches, I have no problem with their moral values. The problem I have is with the popes and the elites. And the thing is, the Pope is very socialist and communist in nature. What Nick Fuentes is proposing is kind of socialist and communist and could actually appeal to the far left. It seems like the skin suit of Catholicism is being prepared for the left to put on as well.
They already put it on.
So,
because they already, I mean, again, we've talked about Vatican II and everything that happened back in the 70s, 60s, et cetera, 50s, and how the Vatican and the church itself was taken over essentially by the progressive values that then they continue to instill in Latin America as well, with socialism and with all of these terrible ideas that conservatives are supposed to fight against and be against, and the right is supposed to be against. However, a lot of them are pointing and looking at Nick Fuentes or people like him that do follow the Catholic doctrine and Catholic Church, which is still connected. The main point of the Catholic Church is the Vatican still. So,
yeah, and the thing is, I think if Nick Fuentes wants to appeal to the right, he needs to separate himself from the Pope and the hierarchy of the Catholic Church. The problem is, I don't think he wants to do that. I think he wants to possibly lean into it to kind of have a socialist appeal to reach over to the left and say, let's unite. I think that's his game plan.
I don't know. I don't know if he even has a game plan.
That being said, I have seen Nick Fuentes debate in the past. I watch a ton of debates. So I watch people, he debates people on the left, the right, and he is a good debater, but he's not a great debater. So if somebody like Ben Shapiro comes in there, I think they're on equal footing, and I would love to see the debate.
And I forgot what I was going to say, but
I was actually surprised in liberals that aren't good at debating, and he actually got beat a few times. And the way I see Shapiro is he is actually a real good debater, and he would prepare for it. So I would like to see the debate.
And unfortunately, the main figure that could have and was taking down Nick Fuentes, like not explicitly, but with the ideas, with the debates, was Charlie Kirk, and we have lost him. So find another Charlie Kirk that he actually had the real Christian values and morals that America was built and founded upon, and he was actually giving them to the people and to the young people.
Well, you absolutely hate Nick Fuentes. I like some of the things he says, but a lot of the things he says are contradictory, especially how he appeals to the hierarchy and the Pope of the Catholic Church. But there's other things that he says that nobody else will say, and that is appealing to a lot of people, especially if you're only looking at him in clips. That's why I could see him really sparking a movement here.
But I do think there are a lot of figures that could rise up or could be even built up to counter Nick Fuentes and actually be more of a Charlie Kirk figure.
You don't need to counter him. You just need to go debate him now.
Exactly. But Ben Shapiro is too tainted now. So I don't think he can do it. I don't think people will listen to Ben because how tainted he is and how he's wanted to essentially instill censorship within the conservative movement. There has to be somebody else. I would have said Charlie Kirk should have debated Nick Fuentes and would actually probably win, but we don't have him anymore.
Charlie Kirk would have been good, but I will also say a lot of the best debaters are also in the Christian nationalist movement right now. I watch a lot of debates, and even if
but they're too small.
No, there's some pretty big ones actually. And that's kind of, Christian nationalism is really on the rise right now.
And the problem is a lot of them do see Nick as somebody that is with them in some sense, and he's not.
I don't know if he's not. I think he is.
But again,
I think
the whole Catholic Church thing.
You and I have definitely different
opinions.
And the whole
communist thing and the socialist thing.
Me and you have different opinions of Fuentes, I think. But that being said,
probably
you want to completely stop him. I'm willing to.
I don't want to completely stop it. I want to get someone better that actually wants to do the things that he pretends to want to do.
I'm going to find it interesting to see how he interacts with the entire political system, because it's becoming more than just a left-right dynamic or Republican-Democrat dynamic in the States right now.
Mm-hmm. And Rafa says, I hope Nick one day reaches the age he looks. Exactly. And Rafa,
he was really small when he was next to Tucker as well. I was like, man, he's tiny.
He's a small gay kid. Rafa says, we must convert Ben Shapiro. Deus vult, Christ is king. I don't think that would help, honestly. But from Wall Street Ape, Tucker Carlson nails it. This is the other figure that's sparking controversies.
Oh, and I have to bring something up here. Okay. You can take the headphones off for a minute. Tucker Carlson came out with something on the shooter, the original Trump shooter. I talked about this yesterday on my show, A lot of the information Tucker had in his documentary was fantastic. I highly recommended it. There was maybe 20 talking points there or 20 pieces of evidence. 3 or 4 of those pieces of evidence have now been debunked. A lot of people are very concerned about the Charlie Kirk shooter, the original 2 Trump shooters, all being connected to the FBI or other 3 that are agencies like the CIA. A lot of that evidence is coming out. The FBI seems to be covering up a lot of things. Yeah, I just kind of wanted to put that out there. Everything in that Tucker Carlson documentary about the shooter was not 100% accurate, although a lot of it was, and it was really good, and it contradicted the FBI narrative.
But it's also interesting because Carlson himself seems to have some connections to some agencies as well.
Well, he could definitely be a CIA agent because his father was an agent and a newscaster. If he followed in his father's footsteps, he's even a bigger newscaster and possibly a bigger CIA agent. He also talked about an operation he was on with his father, but
this is big conspiracy theory
No, it's not. Tucker actually said this.
Yes, but
he didn't know his father was actually doing something.
But him being an actual CIA, that's alleged conspiracy.
We don't know that at all. But what I'm saying,
claiming things.
Possibly, I'm just claiming that he might be. We don't know.
I know, but he might not want that info out there, and I don't want to be looked into or targeted.
Okay, you can play the video.
Well, because I think...
Well, I was going to talk more about his father being a CIA agent. It's very similar to how Andrew Tate's father was a very famous CIA agent and actually ran different training ops on Andrew Tate and Tristan Tate, maybe preparing them to become CIA agents as they got older. I had always suspected that possibly Andrew Tate was a CIA agent as well. But it could be a very similar situation to where Tucker Carlson's father was a CIA agent and maybe trained Tucker, or he followed in his footsteps. The CIA is also very known for keeping it within the family generationally. So I'm not saying any of them are, but there is certain things that are concerning. But I do like Tucker a lot.
From Wall Street Apes, I think he's steered away from being a good reporter, but Tucker Carlson, they all said, what is about Jeffrey Epstein that's so infuriating to people? So infuriating that it's actually causing seismic political problems. What is it? I'll tell you what it is.
What is it about Jeffrey Epstein that's so infuriating to people, so infuriating that it's actually causing seismic political problems? And I hope that they'll address it and it'll get better. I really do. But what is it? I'll tell you what it is. It's the frustration of normal people watching a certain class of people get away with everything every single time. That's what it is. What is it about Jeffrey?
And I think you have Steve Bannon, Nick Fuentes, Tucker Carlson, and some other big personalities over there. Fuentes doesn't necessarily agree with Bannon and Tucker on a lot of things. I think you may see Steve Bannon try to back Tucker in the 2028 elections, and Tucker is kind of like Nick Fuentes, but much more palatable for the mainstream audience.
I think he's too out there for most people. That could come over if there was another.
But you also have to realize when you have an architect of populism like Steve Bannon, who got Trump elected twice, and he was the reason Trump was elected.
And Charlie.
Mix no words. Yeah.
Sidekick says, I suspected them all CIA.
Yeah, that's what I was telling you the other day.
Yes.
I was like, I would not
Probably
be surprised if Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes, and Steve Bannon are all CIA.
Yes.
And Trump, because there was rumors coming out that Trump was cooperating with the CIA years ago.
And we're not going over to RUMBLE because we've been here for now hours.
Yeah.
Thank you for staying with us.
We'll go to the two.
Yes. Thank you for staying with us. Please do subscribe here on YouTube and on RUMBLE because that does help us a lot. Thank you to Rafa, Steve Surfaro, and Sidekick for all your comments. Again, we do read them all and we respond to them live. So it is interesting to have the conversation and see what you all think as well.
Yeah. We'll see you next time. If you're not yet subscribed,
we'll see you on Friday.
Please do so. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers.
Yes, we'll see you on Friday. And tomorrow I will be probably on WDW Pro at 12 p.m. Eastern. So you can see me there as well. Have a great night. See you Friday.